As we're aware from Pete Prendergast, so big shoes to fill, James. Thank you. A little word from me before we start. Meant in all seriousness, I'm sorry, it's me talking, laughing. Being held on the 31st of January 2024. This meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that the Council resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with members attending in person at the Council Chamber, County Hall, Ruthin or remotely via video conference. Those attending remotely are kindly asked to mute their microphones unless they are called upon to speak. Members are also asked to have the video switched on throughout the meeting unless I specifically request you to turn your video off to improve the quality of the audio link when you are speaking. You will be expected to restart your video once you have finished speaking. Please also refrain from using the chat facility as messages sent to all are visible on the webcast. To aid transparency, all meeting business must be conducted through the chair. Thank you. Apologies. I don't think I have any, actually. I think everybody's either here in the chamber or remote. Yeah, we're all there. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Gary?
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Bydd aelodau yn ymwybodol o'r gyfyniad o dan god ymddygiad y cyngor I ddatgan unrhyw gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu mewn perthynas ag unrhyw busnes i'w ystyried yn y cyfarfod heddiw. Dylai cysylltiadau o'r fath gael eu datgelu nawr neu gynted y bydd y cynghorydd neu'r aelod o'r effeithir arnynt yn ymwybodol fod ganddynt gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu yn y materion heddiw. Mae'n ofynnol I holl aelodau sy'n datgan cysylltiad I nodi'n glir beth yw'r cysylltiad ac I hysbysu pa un a yw'n gysylltiad personol neu'n gysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu fel y diffinwyd yn y cod ymddygiad. Mae'n ofynnol I unrhyw aelod sy'n datgan cysylltiad sy'n rhagfarnu adael y cyfarfod yn ystod y drafodaeth ac ni ellir cymryd rhan mewn unrhyw drafodion. Gall aelodau a ddiddordeb personol yn unig gymryd rhan yn y drafodaeth ac unrhyw bleidlais. Os bydd cysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu yn cael ei ddatgelu heddiw nad yw wedi ddatgelu a'i gofnodi yn flaenorol, bydd yn ofynnol i'r cynghorydd dan sylw lenwi a llofnodi ffurflen datgan cysylltiad sydd yn ei ar gael gan staff cefnogi'r pwyllgor sy'n bresennol heddiw neu ar-lein.
Okay, any declaration of interest, you, Irvin?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just declare a personal interest? I propose to refer to the Clwyd Pension Fund in my address to the Council later. I receive a small pensions from that fund from contributions I made as a cabinet member some years ago, but it's a personal interest. Thank you.
Of interest? No. Thank you then. I shall go on to item 3, urgent matters on my sheet. I've got 2 urgent-ish matters. The first one is Rhys Thomas.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd, a diolch am gael cyfle I ddod ac un mater o'ch blaen chi, sef mater gorsaf heddlu newydd ym Mhrestatyn. Os ydych chi fel aelodau'n cofio, blwyddyn diwetha mi ddaeth yr cynghorydd Hugh Irvin ag cynnig o flaen y Cyngor Llawn a gafodd ei gefnogi gan y cyngor I gyd, felly roedd hi'n bleidlais un frydol, os dwi'n cofio, i'r cyngor yma bwyso ar yr awdurdodau ac ar heddlu Gogledd Cymru I weithredu ar cael gorsaf yr heddlu nôl ym Mhrestatyn. Ac fel dwi'n siŵr bod chi wedi gweld y datganiad i'r wasg, oherwydd y cysylltiadau dyn ni wedi llwyddo I wneud gyda'r heddlu yna mae'r freuddwyd yma'n cael ei gwireddu. Mae yna sawl cyfarfod wedi bod rhwng y prif weithredwr a ddynau a'r prif gwnstabl ac oherwydd hynny yna mae yna symud ymlaen wedi bod. Dydd Mawrth diwetha mi oedd bwrdd strategaeth yr heddlu yn cyfarfod ac maen nhw wedi cymeradwyo'r cynllun yma I fwrw ymlaen gyda gorsaf yr heddlu ym Mhrestatyn. Y bore wedyn, roeddwn ni a'r prif weithredwr yn cwrdd eto gyda y prif gwnstabl, ac mi benderfynon ni rhyngom bod hi a digon o sicrwydd yn y cynllun i roi datganiad allan i'r wasg. Felly hoffwn ni ddiolch i'r holl gynghorwyr sydd wedi cefnogi y cynnig o flaen y cyngor. Hoffwn ni ddiolch i cynghorydd Hugh Irvine am ddod a'r cynnig ger yn bron ni blwyddyn diwetha. Hoffwn ni ddiolch i'r rhai sydd wedi bod yn gweithio ar hyn dros y blynyddoedd, gan gynnwys y diweddar cynghorydd Pete Prendergast ag gweddill o gynghorwyr prestatyn, ac mae'n debyg bod y cynllun yma nawr ar ei ffordd. Hoffwn ddiolch i'r prif gwnstabl am yr brwdfrydedd sydd ganddi hi dros y cynllun yma. Hoffwn i ddiolch i swyddogion y sir yma a'r prif weithredwr hefyd am ei gwaith. Mi fydd adroddiad llawnach am hyn yn dod i mag prestatyn sydd pythefnos i heddiw fel dwi'n deall. Felly diolch am y cyfle i ddod â newyddion da at y cyngor sy'n dangos beth sydd yn medru digwydd pan mae'r cynghorwyr i gyd yn cydweithio ar gynllun, ac hefyd mae yn dangos sut mae symud ymlaen pan mae'r cyngor yn medru gweithio gyda partneriaethau eraill megis yr heddlu. Felly diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Rhys. Do you want to respond, Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. Well, that is very encouraging news, Rhys. Very pleased. During the 5 years that I represented Denbighshire County Council on the Police and Crime Panel, I worked hard to build up relationships within North Wales Police. And then when I moved on and handed that role over to Councillor Peter Prendergast, I briefed him thoroughly at the time, first job we did, and he grasped the issue immediately. And I must say, he picked the ball up and continued to run with it. And subsequent to that, Councillor Diane King has done the same. So I'm very pleased to hear that news, and I look forward to further developments and hope that we can finally bring this much needed anomaly, where a growing town of 20-something thousand population with a large retail park has no physical police presence in it of any nature. And we shall look forward to seeing the proposed neighbourhood policing teams and the local beat officers operating from there. And I'm almost in wondering whether I might even consider, if we ever get to an opening ceremony, to trying to present them with a blue lamp to put over the door. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. My second urgent matter is Terry Mendes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in a similar vein, congratulations are in order. On the 12th of January of this year, Arriva, the bus company, terminated the bus service, the X51 service going into the village of Llandegla. And they actually, instead of going down into the village and picking residents up, they just carried along on the A525 from Wrexham to Ruthin. So this actually completely cut off the residents of the village. And the infirm, the disabled, they were expected to walk 1.25 miles uphill to the crossroads on the A525 and try and catch a bus at a bus stop that didn't exist. Now, this obviously caused a lot of dismay and angst and consternation to the residents, but certainly there was a lot of angst towards DCC. And yeah, we got a bit of flap. However, Mr. Chair, can I report that can I report to the council that Arriva have reinstated partly a service, a skeleton sort of service, to the village shop in Llandegla, and DCC under Sarah Palmer have put out to tender a minibus service that will connect to other services. So it's a solution in sorts until June. So can I take this opportunity to thank Barry Mellor, the lead member for transport. He's done an absolute sterling job in this. He's been involving Carolyn Thomas and Darren Miller, and basically, there's been a flurry of emails. I don't know how many phone calls you made, Barry, but you must have blisters on your fingers with, so a solution has been found in just over a couple of weeks' time. And as Councillor Rees said, it's a good indication and it's a good example of what can be achieved when councillors work together for the good of Denbighshire, regardless of political persuasion. And I really think, you know, there should be more of that. So once again, a big thank you to Councillor Mellor and to Sarah Palmer. I did say I'd put in for a pay rise for her, but given the current circumstances, I don't think that's possible. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Barry.
Thank you, Terry. Barry, would you like to respond?
Yeah. Oh, stuffed. Well,
It must be your birthday, if Terry's complimenting you.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Terry Mendes for that. But really, to say that the hard work that Sarah had done in our traffic office was tremendous, along with Carolyn Thomas, RMS, and Darren Miller. They all worked in partnership with Arriva, and I'm glad that we have found a solution. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Terry. Wonderful. Okay, moving on now to item 4 on my agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of November. I think we go through these for accuracy first. On my sheet, it's page 7. If you think of anything that's not quite accurate, let me know. Page 8, 9, Chris?
Says on there, Barry, Terry Mendes has asked if I had any response. It's my understanding, unless the Free French Bulldogs have had it, but I haven't had a letter regarding the Llanec Bridge and where that money was, why we haven't been able to spend it. So that's false. Okay.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, anything wrong on page 9? 10? 11? 11, Kelly?
Can I just ask the point 4 says about the Addiction Recovery Agency. It was the part of the agenda where we were talking about the gambling licenses. I'd ask if the Addiction Recovery Agency, which is the main agency for gambling addicts or people with that problem, could be added to the single point of access register. But I'm not sure if that's been done because that's not actually what the minutes say.
Okay.
So if I could just bring that up. Thank you.
Kelly, okay, we'll check on that. 11, that was, yeah. Anything on page 12 and 13? No, I think I'll go back through it now for any matters arising. Or we've had a couple whether they were right or wrong, but that's fine. Anything matters arising, page 7? 8? 9? Chris again? Oh, is that okay? We got that one. Yeah. 10? 11? 12? 13? That's it, left blank. Thank you. Did someone propose that the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of November correct? James, seconder. Carol, Cheryl, can't your name plate. Are we all in favour that they're right? I'll just show, put your hands up, will do. Super. Thank you very much. Okay, come now to item 5 on our agenda. And this is a presentation of the Council Budget 24-25, presented by Gwyneth and Liz. When they've done their presentation, Graham wishes to say a few words, and then I'll go initially through the group leaders if possible. So each group leader's had a chance to talk. So that'll be Jason, Deleth, Hugh Irving, Hugh Hilditch and Martin. And then I'll open it up to the floor for the rest of the members if they want to say anything. So Gwyneth, the floor is yours there.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you. Felly, mae'r broses sydd i'n harwain ni fan hyn i'r adroddiad yma o bennu cyllideb gytbwys wedi bod yn hir ac yn anodd eleni. Mae wedi bod yn broses anghyffyrddus i ni gyd, a mae rhaid i mi gychwyn drwy ddiolch i'r aelodau i gyd. Da chi gyd wedi bod mor barod i gyfrannu mewn gweithdai a bob math o gyfarfodydd eraill, ac hefyd am gyflwyno syniadau am arbedion. Felly, wrth gychwyn, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Y rheswm wedi bod yn broses mor anghyfforddus wrth gwrs, ydy'r ffaith fod cost cynnal gwasanaethau'r cyngor wedi codi bron iawn i 25 miliwn o bunnoedd ers y llynnoedd. Mae'n swm aruthrol, ond mae rhaid cofio nad problem wedi ei chreu gan Sir Ddimbych ydy'r broblem hon. Mae'r Llywodraeth yn San Steffan wedi dewis peidio ariannu Llywodraeth leol yn deg. A mae hyn wedi achosi i nifer o awdurdodau lleol yn Lloegr orfod cyflwyno'r rhybudd 114, sef datganiad o fethdaliad yn y bôn. Nottingham, Birmingham a Woking ydy'r diweddara, ond mae 1 o bob 5 o awdurdodau lleol Lloegr yn ofni y bydd rhaid iddyn nhw wneud yr un peth. Yng Nghymru, mae'r sefyllfa ariannol hyd yn oed yn waeth, gan nad ydym ni yn derbyn cyfran 10 o arian gan San Steffan. Mae awdurdodau lleol yng Nghymru yn wynebu diffyg o dros 600 miliwn yn eu cyllideb y flwyddyn nesaf. A mae'n debygol o fod yn waeth y flwyddyn wedyn. Felly, mae'n broblem fawr, problem mae rhaid i ni ddelio hefo hi, ond ddim problem Sir Ddimbych ydy hi, a mae'n bwysig cofio hynny. Hyn, mae'r sir yma, Sir Ddimbych, yn parhau i addysgu'n plant ni, i bwydo nhw'n yr ysgol, i cefnogi nhw mewn gymaint o ffyrdd eraill. Da ni'n cefnogi oedolion a phlant drwy'r gwasanaethau cymdeithasol yn wyneb cynnydd aruthrol yn y galw, ac yn mynd i'r afel efo digartrefedd sy'n cynyddu fel na fuodd o rioed o'r blaen. Da ni'n casglu gwaredu sbwriel, da ni'n cynnig gwasanaeth hamdden, llyfrgelloedd, da ni'n cynnal a chadw ffyrdd, da ni'n gweithio tuag at fod yn net siro a miloedd o bethau da eraill. Dwi'n meddwl i bod hi'n bwysig cofio hyn, am bod ni'n parhau i fod yn falch o'r holl waith da mae'r sir yn ei gyflawni bob dydd gweitha y rhwystra anferthol yma sydd gennym ni. Mae'r broses yma o geisio cael cyllideb gytbwys wedi bod yn anodd ddim ond i ni fel aelodau, ond hefyd i'r swyddogion. Mae yna nifer fawr o'r staff wedi cyfrannu i'r cynllun syniadau, a mae'r syniadau hynny yn cael eu hastudio gan benaethiaid gwasanaeth ar hyn o bryd i gynorthwyo hefo amlygu mwy o erbedion, fel ac y bydd yn rhaid i ni wneud. A mae rhaid diolch i Liz a'r holl dîm cyllid am ei gwaith diflino, ond hefyd i'r tîm rheoli corfforaethol a'r uwch dîm arweiniol am ei dyfal barhad drwy'r broses anodd. Dwi'n meddwl bod nhw wedi gwneud gwaith arbennig o dda yn cynnwys ni i gyd yn y broses. Felly, at y gyllideb, mae'r gost ychwanegol o gyflawni gwasanaethau yn 2024-25 o'i gymharu ar flwyddyn flaenorol yn 24.7 miliwn ychwanegol. Mae'r cost wedi cynyddu am nifer o resymau, ond y rhai mwyaf dylanwadol yw chwyddiant cyffredinol, chwyddiant mewn egni ac mewn cyfloga. A hefyd wrth gwrs cynnydd mewn galw am wasanaethau rheng flaen. Mwyn i ni gyflwyno cyllideb gytbwys felly, mae'n rhaid i ni sicrhau cynnydd mewn incwm ac arbedion sy'n cyfateb i'r cynnydd mewn costau. Dyna di'r peth anodd ynde. Sut da ni'n ffeindio bron i 25 miliwn o bunnoedd mewn arbedion ac mewn cynnydd mewn incwm. Y rhan gyntaf ydy edrych ar y cynnydd mewn cyllid a gawn ni gan Lywodraeth Cymru. A da ni wedi derbyn cyfraniad mwy hael na'r disgwyl. Ac un o'r ucha yng Nghymru, mae rhaid cydnabod hynny. Ond dio ond yn cynrychioli 27% o'r cynnydd yn ein costa. Felly ar 73% arall mae rhaid i ni ffeindio fo. Drwy arbedion a cynnydd yn rheth y cyngor. Yn y gyllideb yma, mi da ni'n cynnig arbedion fydd werth 10.4 miliwn, sef 42% o'r cynnydd. A chynnydd yn rheth y cyngor fydd werth 7.6 miliwn, sef y 31% arall. Da ni wedi trio bod yn gytbwys yn fyna. Mi fydd hyn yn golygu fod treth y cyngor yn codi 8.23 y cant. Ac yn ychwanegol ar ben hynny, mi fydd angen ychwanegiad i dalu lefi'r gwasanaeth tân ac argyfwng. A mae hyn yn 1.11 y cant ar hyn o bryd, sy'n gwneud cyfanswm treth y cyngor o 9.34 y cant. Rwan, mi dwi'n hollol ymwybodol y bydd codiad yn treth y cyngor o'r fath yn anodd i breswylwyr sydd ddim bych. Ond mae'n bwysig cofio fod y cynllun gostyngiadau'r treth cyngor, a mi da ni'n trafod honno nes ymlaen, yn amddiffyn y rhai mwyaf bregus. Dros gyfnod o 2 flynedd, mi fydd y cynnydd yn treth y cyngor ychydig yn llai na chwyddiant, i ni weld gymaint o gynnydd yn y galw am y gwasanaethau ni. Mae'n bwysig cofio felly fod bob un o'r cynigion yn yr adroddiad yn hanfodol i ni allu cyflwyno cyllideb gytbwys. Ac ar yr un pryd gwneud y gorau fedrwn ni i amddiffyn y rhai mwyaf bregus yn ein cymunedau. Mae'n werth ailadrodd, dwi'n meddwl, fod yn rhaid i ni osod cyllideb gytbwys. Ac mae'r gyllideb yma yn cynnig hynny, gan geisio bod yn deg o ran gwneud arbedion a chodi treth y cyngor. Fe allan ni fod wedi cynnig gosod treth cyngor is, ond wedyn mi fydda rhaid ffendio mwy o arbedion. Ar y llaw arall, mi allan ni wrthod yr arbedion mwyaf dadleol, ond wedyn bydda rhaid codi treth y cyngor dros 20%. Dwi'n credu fod y gyllideb hon yn cynnig dewis cytbwys nad yw'n ddewis mae neb ohonon ni'n ei groesawu. Mae yna risg yn y gyllideb yma, a mae'n bwysig mod i'n tynnu'ch sylw chi at hynny. Mae'r her da ni'n ei wynebu yn uwch nag erioed o'r blaen, a mae hynny'n wir am y peryglon hefyd. Mae yna beryg y bydd galw am wasanaethau cymhleth yn dal i gynyddu, fel y gymaint wedi gwneud ers y pandemig, gyda mwy o alw am wasanaethau gofal i bobl hŷn a phobl ifanc, a mwy o bobl yn wynebu digartrefedd. Mi da ni wedi gosod hefyd targedion arbedion uchelgeisiol iawn i benaethiaid gwasanaethau, heb wybod i sicrwydd beth fydd yr arbedion hynny. Rhywbeth nad da ni rioed wedi wneud o'r blaen, a mi fydd hyn yn mynnu sylw cyson ar hyd y misoedd nesaf. Dyma'r rheswm pam fod rhaid i ni amddiffyn ein cronfeydd wrth gefn, a pham fod rhaid i ni sicrhau nad da ni'n gwario mwy na'r hyn sydd wedi ei gynllunio. Felly, i gloi, mae'n rhaid cydnabod unwaith eto y gwaith aruthrol sydd wedi'i wneud gan bawb i gyrraedd lle rydyn ni heddiw. Efo cyllideb gytbwys i chyflwyno i chi, do'n i'm yn meddwl y bysa hynny'n bosib misoedd yn ôl. Dwi yn cydnabod, a mae'n bwysig cydnabod fod yna risg yn hanfod y gyllideb hon. Mae yna lawer o waith yn dal i'w wneud i gwblhau. Ond mae'n angenrheidiol ein bod ni'n cytuno'r gyllideb hon heddiw, oherwydd mi fydd pethau'n llawer iawn gwaith pe nai ba ni'n gallu cytuno ar gyllideb gytbwys. A mi ydan ni angen cychwyn ar y gwaith o draws newid y cyngor, gan fod y rhagolygon i'r blynyddoedd nesaf cynyddrwg os nad gwaith nag eleni. Felly, ei bod yn debygol eich bod chi yn flin fel ag yr ydw i a'r cabinet am ein bod ni'n gorfod cyflwyno cyllideb fel hyn i chi. Dwi yn gofyn i chi gefnogi'r gyllideb hon. Felly, diolch yn fawr iawn Gadeirydd. Mi hoffwn i ofyn i Liz rwan grynhoi y manylion yn yr adroddiad ag ateb unrhyw gwestiynau wedyn sy'n codi. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch i chi Gwyneth. Bore da pawb. Thank you Gwyneth. Good morning everybody. Yes, so as Gwyneth mentioned, just to take you through a little bit of the detail. So we received the provisional settlement from Welsh Government on the 20th of December last year. We had been assuming a 3% increase in funding, and in cash terms, we've actually been given a 3.6% increase. That's roughly £1 million more than what we were expecting, which overall is positive, but it doesn't materially change the council's budgetary position or the financial outlook of the council. We haven't been given an indication of what the future year's settlements which has helped us with planning in the past. So we don't know what the percentage is going to be for the future. And both the UK and Welsh governments will set their final budgets after the councils has set its, and we won't receive the final settlement. That's not expected until early March. So some years ago, we used to get settlements in October, a provisional settlement in October, and then a final settlement in December, and that was well in time for setting the council's budgets. So when these timelines were pushed back to December and to March, and our budget fell in between, we introduced an additional recommendation in the budget report. So that's to delegate authority to the head of finance and audit in consultation with the lead member for finance to adjust the use of cash reserves included in the budget proposals by up to 500,000 if there is movement between the draft and final settlement figures in order to allow the setting of the council tax in a timely manner. So that limit of 500,000 is currently included in recommendation 3.4 of the report, and it's set at 500,000. That limit has not changed for a number of years. But also as a result of the UK government announcement at the back end of last week, which provided additional funding for increased demands and the cost of providing social care in English councils, there is likely to be some consequential for Wales, though we do not have any certainty around what that's likely to be. There's therefore a higher probability of seeing a change that's outside of our control between the draft and the final settlements, which we need to make sure that we can accommodate within the council's constitutions while setting the council tax in a timely manner. So my recommendation is that the council, that we increase that limit up to £1 million. That will be sufficient to cope with all eventualities without being excessive. £1 million equates to just 0.4% of the council's proposed budget of 265 million being asked to set this morning. So after Graham's spoken, perhaps I'll come to Gary as to how we handle that situation, which only happened last week, that we need to deal with today. So that's the funding. In terms of Appendix 1 of the report on page 29, that's the medium-term financial plan for the next 3 years and the proposal for setting a balanced budget today. So we're bringing forward a base budget of 251 million. That needs to increase for inflation and pressures of 24.5 million, many of which are outside the council's control. We're proposing to reduce that by the savings total, and those savings combine to 10.4 million to bring a revised budget of just under 265 million. That's balanced by the additional funding from Welsh Government of getting on for 7 million and the additional yield in the council tax as Gwyneth has outlined. Major savings proposals, so these are our strategic proposals, are listed in Appendix 2. The estimated level of savings that are sufficiently developed in order to deliver savings in 24-25 total 2.4 million. We've been discussing these proposals for some months now. There are others still under development that are included on that list, which we will continue to bring forward following the process that we've established. So that's the corporate executive team for initial discussion, then informal meetings of the corporate executive team and cabinet before a report and discussions at Teams meetings for all members before any final decisions are taken at an appropriate level. The non-strategic savings are listed in Appendix 3. These are the estimated list, so that those estimated list of savings total 2.3 million. The heads of service, in conjunction with the lead member, are delivering, as they explained to you at the workshop that we had in Denbigh some months ago. And these are the equivalent of the efficiency savings, the 1% efficiency savings that the council has been making for some years as part of its budget setting process. I issued members with further details in confidence around some of those proposals last week so that you've got the details of what they are. Despite the efforts in finding efficiencies, savings, reductions in costs and services to date through the major savings proposals, through the non-strategic savings, unfortunately, given the scale of the financial challenge this year, that isn't sufficient to set a balanced budget. So each head of service was issued a further savings target to find. Heads of service knew that this was coming. They've been working on them since, and they know they need to be delivered as soon as practical. They total 3 million, but each head of service is clear what level of savings they need to find. One of the major savings proposals on that list is the voluntary exit scheme. We haven't assumed any savings from this scheme in either the major savings proposals list or the non-strategic savings list. So every service will make savings as a result of that scheme. The corporate executive team is making the final decisions following a review of all business cases that have been submitted by heads of service. And these savings will go some way to delivering the bulk of that 3 million that we need to find. It is important to remember, though, that steps have been introduced in year to reduce the level of expenditure. We've slowed down recruitment. We're carrying more vacancies than we have previously. So it will be possible to make savings by deleting some of those posts. And services have also been reviewing fees and charges to see where they can raise additional incomes. And there are restructures and many other things ongoing as we work through different ways to reduce cost and to reach the 3 million savings that we've included. The total savings then are 10.4 million, that's 7.7 million without the schools figure. That is a significant level of savings to deliver in a single year. I've gone back to 2010, 11, and I can't see a year when it has been bigger. We can't deliver that level of savings without affecting frontline services. The scale of it is just too big. There will always need to be an efficient back office function. Having said that, as you would expect, the back office, the support service, have been making more savings than frontline savings. I've done some analysis. Broadly, support services savings on the 23-24 budgets combined are round about the 10% mark, compared with a 4% savings on all of the frontline services. So I thought it was helpful just to set that context. Schools, it's an increase in funding for schools budgets to cover pay inflation, energy inflation and other inflationary increases, and includes the funding for the increase in the teacher's pension, means there's an additional 7.6 million going into the schools budget. The schools budget is our largest budget. Although we want to protect it, we cannot protect it in its entirety. The scale is just too big. So it's reasonable to expect schools to make some savings, and 3% has been included. After the increases and the reduction, they net off, and there'll be an increase of just under 5 million going into schools. That's 5.82% increase overall on the schools budget. We have been communicating regularly to schools throughout this year. They've been told to plan between 2 and 4%. We've modelled 3% for them in the 3-year budgetary figures that we give to them, and schools have been planning for this. That leads then to a council tax recommendation, as Gwyneth has outlined, for council services of 8.23%. The fire levy, after the reduction that was made at the meeting last week, is at 1.1%. So that's the contribution from council tax to fund the increase in the fire levy. That brings us overall to a 9.34% council tax level being recommended. The Band D equivalent, as outlined in the report, is an increase of £143 per year and brings the total to £1,679 overall. Council service is £126 of that, and the fire is £17. I wanted to mention reserves. The council has had to use reserves in year to fund overspends recently. So in the financial year 2022-23 and 23-24, we plan to use reserves to fund exit costs. That's both voluntary and compulsory. There are some compulsory redundancies in these in the proposals outlined. These are one-off costs, and so it makes sense to use reserves for this purpose so that savings then can be made by the services in full from year one. We're also planning to use reserves for the review of the pay grade that's necessary over the next couple of years. That's a considerable use of reserves. It's necessary given the financial challenge, but we must remember we can only use reserves once. They should only be used to fund one-off type of costs, and an over-reliance on reserves is not sustainable. We need to protect reserves to mitigate the risks that Gwyneth has outlined and for future resilience. So I would advise against any further use of reserves given the higher level of risks that are being faced. Gwyneth as lead member is right to point out the higher level of risk in this year's budget. There's savings to be found of 3 million. The heads of service are working on delivering that as soon as practical, and the voluntary exit scheme that will help us get to that, and a number of other initiatives that are ongoing. The savings target of 7.6 million is considerable. We will need to strengthen financial management in year to track how we're delivering those savings on a monthly basis, and we'll need to report that to you as members regularly. That will enable us to identify any issues at an early stage so we can take prompt action as we move forward. Forecasting cost pressures in certain areas has been really challenging, areas like social care and homelessness. We've used latest forecasts of demand, but that comes with risk. So we've tried to be prudent where we can to build in some resilience. So things like the levels of pay that we've budgeted for, they're above where some analysts think inflation is going to be. So it's hopeful that will provide some resilience in the budgets. I think it's important when we're taking decisions for 24-25, we need to consider the medium-term position. That has worsened over as we've gone through this year, it's worsened. So 25-26 and 26-27 financial years look worse. You'll see that in the medium-term financial plan than compared with 24-25. We're not anticipating increase in funding from Welsh Government over those years. If anything, it looks like it's going to be slightly negative. And that coincides with increased demand for services and therefore increase in our cost pressures. So even assuming council tax increase at a modest level of 3.8% of both those years, there's a gap already of 15 million and 13 million respectively in 25-26 and in 26-27. And we have to bear that in mind as we set the 24-25 budgets. This budget is an ongoing process. We need to understand what we know now and what we don't. We've got to remember a budget is a financial plan. It will need to be adapted as we go through the year, and we won't know every detail now. But it's now is the time that we need to set the 24-25 budget, and that has to be done for council tax purposes, so we can inform residents and arrange to collect council tax in a timely way and in line with the council tax legislation. But I want to assure you that the work on the budget doesn't stop. It continues. We need to refine our savings proposal, and we need to make sure we continue to communicate with you as members and follow those processes that we have developed over the past few months. I just wanted to thank everybody involved for their work to date to get us to this point, both members and officers. And in particular, I wanted to thank Steve Gadd, who's done a lot of this work before I came into post. So I wanted to thank Steve. And then finally, the scale of the financial challenges made this year particularly difficult. I think we've taken a strategic and coordinated approach to the budget setting, taking a realistic view of what the demands and the pressures are. We've made strategic and major savings needed due to the scale of the challenge, but that has been balanced against finding further non-strategic savings to ensure that we're as lean and as efficient in our processes that we can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'll ask Graham to be next on my list now, please, Graham.
Chair, thank you. So just a few words from me before you go to the important part of discussion and questions, and I'm sure there'll be lots of those. I think it goes without saying that this is the most difficult and challenging budget that I've known that we've had to set after many years in local government. And I have to say that the prospects for next year are not much brighter. So this is a budget not only for next year, but will lay the foundations for the budget for the year after. So the decisions we make now are important, not only just in the immediate, the short term, but the medium term as well. I'm not going to obviously repeat everything that's already been said, but we have worked hard to protect schools as far as we possibly can. We think we're in a reasonable and sensible position with the schools budget. We're also providing an additional £10 million for social care to cover for an ever increasing demand in social care. So that's an additional £10 million that we're putting into social care. And that represents a significant additional funding in those frontline services that supports our most vulnerable people in our communities. To help pay for that additional funding and cover other pressures, which Liz has mentioned, we've clearly had to make savings and efficiencies elsewhere. And we've looked across all service areas to look for those savings and efficiencies. And as Liz has said, we have tried to do this in a coordinated and strategic way by looking at everything that we do to make the necessary savings and limit their impact. But of course, there is always an impact when we're making savings, and they can't all come from back office. There needs to be an element of an efficient running of the council in order for us to be able to deliver those frontline services. So we've tried to, the pain to some degree has been spread, and this has involved, so members are clear on this, deleting a number of vacant posts. And as Liz has said, some of that's gone on in year because of the financial pressures we've faced this year, and that will help us into next year. Some compulsory redundancies, and of course we want to avoid that wherever we can. And also we've got the voluntary redundancy scheme as well, again, that Liz has mentioned. So the savings are broadly being categorised into major savings and non-strategic savings, and you've got those lists today, but we've shared those lists with members previously over a number of months. And the very scale of the pressures and the wide-ranging packages of savings that we've had to pull together has meant it's not been an easy budget to communicate to members. And we hear that and we understand some of the concerns that members have had around the way we've tried to present it, but it's not been an easy task. And as ever, we will try and improve and do better in future years. So we have heard some of those references from members. But I just want to recap on our engagement with members because we have tried hard in that engagement process. We'd had the member suggestion scheme, of course, which we're still working through. We had a number of suggestions from members. There's been attendance at group meetings. We've had 13 hours of budget workshops over the time. 13 hours of budget workshops. I remind you that Steve ran one in July, which was a virtual meeting. In October, we had a hybrid meeting here. In November, a 4-hour meeting at Denby Town Hall, in which all the heads of service attended and gave presentations. In December, we were here in County Hall in Ruthin for another long meeting with a number of presentations and sharing information And as recently as a few weeks ago here in January here, we had another hybrid meeting that will always be known as the Graph of the Year meeting, for those of you who don't remember that. So in addition to the 5 budget workshops, we've had 8 virtual meetings. Each one of those meetings has lasted about an hour, and each one of those virtual meetings has discussed in detail some of those major savings proposals on that list that we've shared with you. So in total, that's over 21 hours of direct engagement with members in our attempts to try and explain what is a very complicated and wide-ranging budget. And as we've said, the scale of the change and setting this year's budget is actually more of a process than an event. So in previous years we've come and it's all been nicely tied up and we can say at this point, here is the budget. But because of certain unknowns and because of the scale of the changes, it's clear that not every element of this £260 million budget, not every pound, not every element has been fully nailed down. And that is inevitable given the scale of change. And I think Liz has explained that. So there are still some details to be resolved in this budget. We understand that. So it's not a budget without risks, but we are confident we have mitigated against those risks. And again, Liz has given some of that detail. But what I want to do is underline a commitment that I've given previously, and I'll do it again today, is a commitment to continue to engage with members through those budget workshops and those Teams meetings, and any other engagement that members come to us and make suggestions for. That might be attending group meetings, etc. So I can see more workshops and more briefings in the near future. We've got a number already kind of lined up, and some of those invites will be going out. And we need those workshops because we need to work through those bits of this budget that we're about to set need to be nailed down. So we need those workshops with members so you're fully informed. But also we need workshops to go beyond just next year's budget, because we've talked about the pressures that are in the future and the need to talk about some transformation of the council. And that's not for today, that is for the future over the coming weeks and months once we've managed to put this budget to bed. But there is a commitment that members will be involved and engaged in more workshops about how we can do things differently. So that's me, Chair. I just want to pull some of those strands together, and I think the probably important thing is to go into the debate and discussion, but there's probably just one thing that's still hanging out there, which is one of the amendments to the recommendations.
With that, thank you very much, Graham. If you'd allow me to listen to the lead members, the group member leaders first, then we'll go to your amendment on 3.4, Liz, if that's all right. So I'll listen to group leaders now, please. Jason, I've got you first.
Diolch, Chair, thank you. I'll be brief actually, because I think a lot of what I've said has been said already. And as Graham said, it's important that all of us as members have the debate today. So I just want to, just briefly, before the budget, I want to welcome James to the first council meeting. Welcome, James. I want to touch on the other earlier discussions, and thank Rhys for the work on the Prestatyn police station, of course, our late friend Pete Prendergast, and thank Terry for his comments on the bus and the work that Barry did. And I want to continue the theme of saying, look, we can work together and we can do more than influence, we can deliver for our communities, and that those are good examples of us doing that. So it would be remiss not for me to mention that. So the budget, of course, the first thing I want to do is thank Liz and all of the team, finance team. Liz, you mentioned Steve. I wish to thank Steve as well, and thank you again for coming in at a relatively late stage in what has been rightly described as this most unprecedented and the most challenging of budget setting processes. I want to thank Gwyneth as the lead member, who's worked extremely hard on this budget. I will mention all of the groups in 1 minute, but we're a Plaid and Labour coalition, and Gwyneth has taken on this role as lead member and done an excellent job. And I think that reflects the strong partnership that we have in our coalition. So diolch fawr, Gwyneth. So here we are to decide on the budget. This moment has been a long time coming. It's been a long process. It's been, as I've said, the most challenging and totally unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in. But during that process, there's been good, strong debate. There's been good, strong challenge from all members, and that's welcome. That's a good thing, and it shows the strength of our democracy. We've had disagreements, and we've had those disagreements. I want to say how brilliant it is that every single one of us is here. Lots of us here in person, and everyone on the screen. And I know that many of us have made a real effort to get here today. So for those who've done that, I want to say thank you very much. Now, we all come from different perspectives. We all come from different traditions. We all come from different parts of the county, and a lot of us all come from different political parties. But I can guarantee one thing today, one thing that we are all agreed on. We can all agree that none of us in the room want to vote for these savings, these efficiencies. I'll call them what they are, cuts. Nobody wants to vote for these cuts, okay? I certainly don't as a Labour politician. I walked into the Labour Party office in Liverpool as an idealistic student in 1988. I didn't think I'd have a career in politics, and I didn't think I'd be presenting a budget which had to deal with a situation where we find ourselves without the funding to balance a budget without making these efficiencies, these cuts. Okay? We've all discussed at length as to why we are here. Gwyneth has mentioned it in her opening remarks. You all know what I believe in, so I won't repeat it. But I believe I'm right. I believe there's reasons why we are here, decisions made elsewhere. And I think people and the public are seeing that and getting it because of what we're seeing happening to councils in England, the recent announcement about more money, that in itself explains that the government is recognising that there's been a shortfall. I believe I'm right as to the reasons why we are here. But nevertheless, you know, we now find ourselves faced with the budget, faced with these papers in front of you, faced with making these extremely difficult decisions. We've heard from, we've heard from Gwyneth and about the brilliant things that this council does. We've already touched on how we've delivered a police station in Prestatyn and partly rescued a bus service in Llandegla. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We educate children, we look after our elderly and infirm. And this budget is presented in a way to protect those services. We've heard about the pressures we are under from forces in our society. It's a difficult world out there, and we're at the front line of dealing with those societal problems, and we're doing a good job. We have to deliver those vital services. To do that, we have to present a balanced budget. This budget here today does that. In these unprecedented times, we cannot afford to not vote for this budget. That is the uncomfortable truth. That is the harsh reality. So given where we are, and given the journey we've been on, and again, I'll thank everyone for their involvement and their participation in that process. Given where we are today, we must vote for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I'll now ask Delith to contribute. Thank you.
Byddai'n siarad Gymraeg. Munud bach i roi plîs ffonio ymlaen. Dwi'n gwybod bod hynny. Gai yn y lle cyntaf ddiolch am y cyfle i godi'r ymwneud ac i siarad ar ran y fi'n hun a grŵp Plaid Cymru. Mewn cyfarfod sydd dwi'n gwybod yn un anodd i bob un ohonyn ni. Mae eraill wedi cyfeirio'n barod. Mae nid problem sydd ddim bach ydy hon, ond problem sydd yn ar draws y wlad, ddeud y gwir, yn dydi, ac ar draws Cymru. Dydw i, fel ydych chi'n gwybod, yn sefyll fel aelod Plaid Cymru, mis ydych chi'n gallu dychmygu beth i marn gwleidyddol ar y mater. Ond dwi'n meddwl mae Gwyneth wedi cyfeirio, dwi'n cefnogi'r hyn mae hi wedi ddeud. Ond dwi'n teimlo bod rhaid i ni weithio gyda'n gilydd yn y mater yma. Mae o'n hynod bwysig bod ni'n gallu gwneud hynny. Felly mae yna penderfyniadau sydd wedi cael ei gwneud ymhell sydd draw i'r sir yma sydd wedi'n arwain ni i'r sefyllfa ers y rhaid i ni ddelio gyda hi. Penderfyniadau anodd, heriol. Dim un ohonyn ni wedi dewis lle am beth fi. gafodd y myswatio hi sefyll fel cynghorydd heb ystyried y bydd yr rhaid delio gyda'r math yma o benderfyniadau, ond delia sy'n rhaid i ni. Credu mae'n dyletswydd ni heddiw i bod yn onest a theg gyda'n trigolion yn staff a phawb sydd yn gweithio i ni hefyd. Mae'n bwysig iddyn nhw o'r sefyllfa yr ydym ni yn ni wynebu a gwneud hynny yn deg a thrylwyr. Fyswn i'n hefyd yn licio diolch i'r Cabinet ac i'r tri aelodau Cymru yn arbennig yn y lle cyntaf, sef Cynghorydd Rhys Thomas, Emrys Wyn ac yn arbennig felly i Gwyneth Ellis am ei gwaith yn y bartneriaeth gyda'r grŵp llafur. Dwi'n gwybod gymaint sydd wedi digwydd mewn cyfarfodydd sy'n cefn i llenni ac hefyd mewn cyfarfodydd Cabinet cwestiynau. Mae'n herio, mae'n drafod, mae'n gwestiynu, mae'n herio di-gynsawd wedi digwydd, a dwi'n gwybod bod hynny wedi digwydd sy'n cefn i'r broses yma, fel rhan o'r broses o gyrraedd i'r gyllideb yma dyn ni'n ei gyflwyno heddiw. Diolch hefyd i Liz ac i'r tîm gyllid ariannol ac i Steve Gad yn blaenoddi hynny. Fyswn ni'n licio diolch i chi am pa mor eglur a thrylwyr dych chi di egluro'r holl broses i ni. Dydw i ddim yn berson arian gymaint o hynny, ond dwi wedi medru dilyn a deall a cwestiynu hynny. A mae hynny'n i lawr i chi ac yn y ffordd dych chi wedi medru trosglwyddo o wybodaeth hynod anodd mae i ni. Felly, allai'n diolch digon i chi am hynny. Swn ni'n licio diolch hefyd i'r swyddogion a rhyblygrwydd i addasu yn y modd chi wedi delio gyda ni fel aelodau llawr trwy ddod â'r cwestiynau a rhoi digonedd o gyfle i ni gwestiynu, i ofyn cwestiynau ac i herio'r penderfyniadau sydd wedi cael ei gwneud trwy'r gweithdai sydd wedi digwydd. Mae'n nifer helaeth ohonyn nhw wedi digwydd. Dwi'n ddiolchgar i chi fel swyddogion am y rhyblygrwydd ych chi wedi ddanos wrth newid yn y ffordd ych chi wedi gwneud hynny i ni, sydd yn helpu ni gobeithio i fedru dod i benderfyniad doeth heddiw. Dwi yn teimlo'n ond dyletswydd ni heddiw ydy i peisio'r balans. Does am un o'n ni eisiau gwneud toriadau. A mae rhaid i ni ddefnyddio'r gariad fel mae Jason wedi dweud, na toriadau ydyn nhw. Does dim cuddio rhag hynny, toriadau ydyn nhw. Ond mae rhaid ni geisio'r balans, fel bod ni'n gallu parhau i gynnig y gwasanaethau dylen ni fel sy'n fod yn balchion dyn nhw. A bod ni'n ceisio parhau i gynnig rheini i'r graddfa gorau gallen ni gyda'r adnoddau prin sydd yn mynd yn brinach sydd ganddo ni. Na i ddim tynnu sylw at hanodion unigol yr rheini mae'n nifer ohonych chi eisiau wedi gwneud hynny. Dwi'n gwybod hefyd y byddwn ni fel aelodau angen cario ymlaen i herio. Felly byddwch yn barod am hynny swyddogion, mi fydd na herio, mi fydd na gwestiynau anodd yn cael eu codi. Ond dwi'n meddwl na dyna'n gwaith ni'n dyna pam dyn ni yma. A felly fyswn ni ddim yn gwneud yn dyletswydd os nad ydyn ni'n gwneud hynny, a mi fyddwn ni yn gwneud hynny wrth symud ymlaen. Fel dyn ni wedi clywed gen eraill, a dwi'n hefyd eisiau diolch i Terry ac i Rhys am y cyflwyniadau cynnar. Wrth gydweithio, mi fedrwn ni lwyddo a mi fedrwn ni gynnig y gorau gallwn ni. Ond trwy gydweithio mae hynny'n mynd i ddigwydd. Bod ni'n gallu rhoi barn unedig ar bethau symud ymlaen. Felly dwi yn credu mae'n dyletswydd ni heddiw i bod yn gyfrifol, i bod yn gall ac i gefnogi ac i gwestiynu y gyllideb yma, ond hefyd i gefnogi'r hyn sydd wedi cael ei wneud hyd yn hyn. Mae gennau gwestiwn oedd yn eisiau gofyn ynglyn â'r dyraniad ychwanegol dyn ni wedi glywed yn cael ei gyfrannu yn Lloegr o'r 600 miliwn yma, a pa effaith a pa bosib bydd hynny, effaith bydd hynny'n gallu cael arno ni lawr y linell, ond na i adael hynny i chi ateb yn y man. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Delith. Do you want to just quickly answer that one if you can, and then I'll go to you.
Diolch, Delith. So there was an announcement, so to clarify, there was an announcement made by UK government last week. It was an additional 600 million to English councils. 100 million of that is to do with grants. 500 million of that is to do with the pressures for social care. We understand there is likely to be a Welsh government consequential What that consequential is unclear. It's around about the 25 million. But Welsh Government understand there may be negative consequentials of some other earlier budgetary decisions. They won't know until the UK Government is set, and that doesn't happen until the 6th of March. There are discussions ongoing, as you can imagine. The Welsh Government will have to make a decision as to what they do with that consequential. So although it comes down on social care, there is a decision for Welsh Government to make as to what they do with it. It's in their gift to be able to decide. They may give additional funding to councils, but they may feel there is a need for additional money, for example, in the health service. That's their decision to make. So that's the first unknown. They need to take that decision. Should they decide to allocate a consequential to councils and through to local governments, that could be done in a number of ways. It may go into the settlements, so it could improve the settlements. So you could have a higher settlement than the provisional to the final. Or they may decide to allocate it as an additional grant in year. So it's unclear as to how that will work. If it goes into the settlement, there are calls for, some authorities have received a floor. There's some calls for the floor to be increased to protect some authorities. Denbighshire then would not gain as much were there not a floor. It's just the mathematics of it. And then also, we don't know whether this is recurring or one-off funding. I don't think anybody is clear on that yet. So there is some way to go on this decision. So it might be positive. But in the scale of things, 25 million across Wales, again, isn't going to make a substantial difference to the numbers we've got in front of us today. And there is a requirement on us to move forward so that we can set council tax, we can inform residents, and that we can and deal with that. So that's the reason more behind the need to increase that recommendation from the 500,000 to the million. There's a chance, but again, it's if, buts and maybes, and we don't know at this stage. We need to wait and see.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dallas. You, on to you. Now, you, Irving, sorry, there's no got two U's, but you, Irving, first.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Gwyneth, for your budget. And thank you, Liz, for your brilliant exposition, I would say, on the mechanics of it. I find it really impressive, and how gratifying that you're here today to sit by the lead member and actually tell us face to face how much better that is than over a screen. Thank you. I am going to present a differing viewpoint, but I'm going to present it with respect. And I may say something that is critical, but it's with respect. But first, I need to ask a question before I go too far. We need a balances contribution this year, correct? That balancing, where does that balances contribution come from?
So, do you mean a contribution from reserve?
Yes, where do those, where is the money in those reserves? What is the money in those reserves that you're going to now utilise in this budget? What was it there for?
So, as the budget as it's set out in that appendix, there is no contribution from reserves in order to balance the budget. There is a planned use of reserve, though, in order to achieve those savings through things like redundancies, both through the voluntary exit and also through compulsory. There is also a planned use of reserves for the pay and the grading restructure that needs to be done, but no firm decisions have been taken around that yet.
Where is the planned use that I heard discussed somewhere in all this, that there is a reserve fund earmarked for the Clwyd Pension Fund in the event that they need support?
So to clarify that, so there is so in a member workshop, I don't think it's in the detail of that is in the report, or is it maybe possibly so there is a reserve that's labelled superannuation recovery. So to clarify, it's not to support the Clwyd Pension Fund. The Clwyd Pension Fund's okay. Important that I stress that because we're in a public meeting. This is to do with support, staff, the bulk of the staff that we employ are members of the Clwyd Pension Fund, and Denbighshire is a part of that along with Wrexham and Flintshire. We set contributions, employer contributions, and that's done on a triannual basis, so every 3 years. So in the recent 3 years that we've just gone through, those contributions came down, and it was part of the savings of how we were able to balance the current year's budget, but sometimes they go up. And in recent history, they've always been going up. And there's been a deficit on the fund overall, but only should everybody retire tomorrow, that we needed to work through. So what was done some years ago was there was an opportunity to create a reserve should that increase come at some point in the future, in order for us to be able to increase the contributions without unduly affecting the budget. It gave us some time. So that reserve was set aside for that purpose. The situation is now different. So we're now able to repurpose that reserve to use it for a different reason. And the reason, as suggested in the report, is to fund exit costs and also to fund the pay and grading structure if we need. So if you like, it's a general pay reserve, and we're able to set it aside for a different purpose to what it is.
Thank you. I may refer to that in my notes here. If I get the terminology wrong, I'm sorry. It's complex, but you'll have to bear with me. I'm not insulting anybody. So, as briefly as I can now, we must look to our two previous budgets. 22-23 was brought in by the previous administration when the precept was shored up by something in the region of a £1.2 million contribution from reserves. I have to just mention that our lead member was then a backbencher who argued against this, preferring a 0% rate increase and the budget shortfall therefore to be fully funded from reserves. Thankfully, a majority view prevailed, and this was not allowed by members, or our situation today would be far worse. 23-24. This member is now the lead member for finance, and continued this policy by overseeing a budget restricting the rise in precept last year to 3.8% by a significant raid on reserves. In any event, this hasn't proved sufficient because we still have a near £3 million deficit requiring a second raid in this financial year. That budget was defective because the precept was far too low, because the foresight to recognise ongoing threats was not apparent within the Cabinet and the membership, and very few members spotted this, preferring the much more attractive political option of having one of the lowest rate rises in Wales. And sadly, this gambit has failed spectacularly, and that's part of the reason why we're here today. 24-25. Now we're not in a financial storm, we're in a hurricane, and there are massive demands for our services, but we can't balance the books. And why? Because if I understand Liz correctly, the usable reserves are all but wiped out by somewhere in the region of £8 million over 2 years. All that can be produced, as Liz has just done very well in trying to explain to me, is funds quite properly set aside that as part of this superannuation reserve, did you call it? I'm not quite sure. But I believe that is indefensible. Raiding those sorts of funds is indispensable. To use funds set aside in case they're needed for superannuation may not be wrong. I wonder if it could be legally challengeable. Now, this budget demands that heads of service seek further savings, and a document has circulated this weekend telling us that reserves will not be utilised in 25-26. As I understand it, in my limited financial mind, if this budget goes through, there won't be any way to use. A draconian list of cuts accompanies it. I feel it's unprofessional to present us with this at this very last moment, and I'm sad that the Chief Executive allowed it. Now, if we can't balance the books today, what should we do? And there's about 28 days left to do it. Well, I'm going to present a differing viewpoint with respect that the Chief Executive and the Head of Finance sit down with the leader and the finance lead, and quite simply, they create two boxes. Into number one goes statutory services plus frontline and essential services, and into number two goes everything else. Unthinkable, I know. Things such as green issues, active travel, all those committees and working parties that we sit on, support for outside bodies, etc., etc. But we just have to put our house in order first. And the Head of Finance will keep the Council aware of progress through the year and then advise which of these projects can then be afforded. We must prioritise our spending. We must stop living in a difficult world when we try to do everything for everybody. If we approve this budget today, we do nobody any favours. We may avoid commissioners this year, but with everything gone, including the money for that superannuation reserve, they could conceivably be at the door next year. There's nothing to gain by throwing our final reserves down a black hole, never to be seen again, and very little gained except a little time. I believe this budget is a triumph of hope over reality. I ask members to set aside political affiliations and reject it. There are 28 days for reality to kick in and save this county's future. So members, please do the right thing. Reject these proposals. Cabinet, start looking into the essential and desirable boxes. Let's avoid the commissioner journey, but please, financial common sense must start today. Sadly, I will have to vote against this budget.
Thank you. Do you want to respond, or just I don't mind if you don't want to. I'm not bothered. Yes, Jill. Let's sorry.
No, I'll quickly respond, Hugh. And you know, thank you for your contribution, and I did take it in the respectful manner that you intended, so thank you for that. What I will say is, I think we've already discussed in numerous workshops and so on about the difficulty with statutory services and frontline and needed services, and putting things in these boxes of things that are absolutely necessary and things that are not is incredibly difficult to define. And if you did have those two boxes and asked every member in this room to put services in the necessary or the unnecessary box, I think you'd at the end of it have a very full necessary box and an almost empty unnecessary box. Because, you know, that's what people think. Lots of what we do is necessary and very, very important, isn't it? So you're right that we need to avoid going down the route of not having a balanced budget. That's the most important thing. We don't want commissioners to get involved. In my opinion, the only option we've got to do that now is to pass this budget, but to look in real detail over the next year, as we've already mentioned, on, you know, the savings proposals, how they're being implemented, and how we're, as Graham wants to do, how we're moving forwards, and that's vitally important. I will ask Liz just to come in on the detail of the reserves.
Yeah, Gwyneth, thank you for the comments and the questions. I'm not sure I like the tone of being called unprofessional in my first budget meeting. Do find that somewhat insulting, if I'm being honest. I say that with respect. So to clarify a couple of points, the 23-24 budget, the current year's budget, council tax was set at 3.8%, did not require any use of reserves. If you look at the cabinet papers that are produced every month, it's detailed in there how we balanced the 23-24 budget. There is no mention of the use of reserves in how we balance the 23-24 budget. So there has been no use of reserves in 23-24. So it's important I clarify that. In terms of the legal challenge about what's being proposed in this year's budget, there's mention of the superannuation recovery. That reserve stands at 3.6 million. It's included in the what we call or deem the earmarked reserves. They are earmarked for specific purposes, and it's perfectly reasonable and legal to be able to decide and change what that is earmarked for. So there is no legal challenge around what this budget plans in terms of use of reserves. We set reserves aside for risks and difficult times. I think it's entirely appropriate for planned use of reserves in order to set a balanced budget through a difficult period. We're not using all of the reserves. The report mentioned there's a need to protect those reserves in order to mitigate the risks that we've got in front of us. So it's a controlled use of reserves, making sure that we protect as much as possible for the risks that lie ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. You held it, Chuck. I've got you next
Sorry.
on it. Sorry. Connor, you had something to
Just
say?
to
Sorry,
back
quickly.
that up, I just refer to
Working.
the report. Members can read it themselves at 4.5.1, because there seemed to be a suggestion that we were frittering away all the reserves and to use all the reserves. Yet the report is really clear. The current convention is to keep a minimum of £5 million unmarked reserve to meet any unforeseen costs and pressures, unexpected events outside the council's control. It would be imprudent to plan to use the first 5 million of this reserve. The report is clear that we're not frittering away all the reserves. The report in front of you is clear that we are to retain a minimum of £5 million of reserves. Just need to make that absolutely clear because it's in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Graham for that one. You, back to you, mate.
Thank you, Chair. BRYS. First of all, I want to thank Jason for actually once and for all saying they are cuts, because all we've been doing over the last few months is window dressing that they're not cuts. So thank you, Jason, for being upfront and honest on that. I also want to just pick up something Delis said. My duty is to do what's best for my residents in Ruthin, not to vote for a budget for the sake of it. So I think we all have a duty and answer to our residents. We don't have a duty just to vote for something. Do you want to make that point abundantly clear? And I do take the positive of Terry and Barry Mellor working together, dream team, the police working together. I think that's fantastic and we can do that. But we all have to have the same vision and have the same core beliefs at that time to be able to achieve that. And I think this is why maybe on this budget there are different views. I mean, me and Gwyneth had this debate last year when I voted against the budget, and I again asked how we got to the figure of 3.8, and I think you told me, Gwyneth, I threw my toys out of the pram, I think is what you said to me. But maybe I was right to do so, looking at the deficit where we're at now. And I think we have to stop this. I've sat here this morning and listened to everyone, thanking officers, thanking members, thanking cabinet members. The reality is, it's the job, guys. People are paid to do the job. And the buck stops with Graham. The buck stops with the cabinet. You are paid as cabinet members. And it's not a blame game of Westminster against Wales or whatever. It has to stop. We are here doing the job for Denbighshire residents. And let's keep that focus on them. We're looking, we've had one of the highest in Wales locally, yeah? And maybe that is a great help that it is a Labour-led council that we've had that. And if that's the case, brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Drakeford. Oh, all right. Calm down. And we're looking at the budget, yeah? And we have had engagement, Graham. I can't knock you. We've asked and you've listened, and maybe not the outcomes that we wanted. But, you know, we all have different views on libraries or whatever it may be. But what we're looking at here is a council tax rise with less services. That's the bottom line. If you pay a membership, you always ask, what's in it for me? And what you're having now is you're paying out more and getting less. And that's a difficult pill, which I referred to in Cabinet on, was it Tuesday? Last week. But Gwyneth always says, we've got to set a balanced budget. But this isn't a balanced budget. This is a vote to get the council tax invoices out on time. That's what this is. Because you haven't got a balanced budget. You've got a 3 million gap in this budget. You've got a pressure on the reserves, and Graham says it's in the paper. Yeah, it is on page 21, is it? Penny, what, 4.55. The council has and will have to utilise reserves available to fund. First one, 1.6 million. Second, 3.2. Exit scheme, we don't even know what the figures are. What's the last one? Additional costs over and above the 1.7 pressure. So you're asking this council to vote on something that's not balanced. And we can't do that. And there's no duty to do that. If the budget is not balanced, we cannot support it. And this is absolutely not a balanced budget. I understand the difficulties and I have empathy with everyone. But this is a paper exercise to get the bills on time and not do the right things for people of Denbighshire. And no way can we vote for this because it's not balanced.
Thank you. Do you want to respond again, Gwyneth, please?
Diolch Hugh. Dwi'n ateb yn Gymraeg os y tîm yn meindio. Ti'n hollol gywir yn deud fod beth ni'n gynnig yn fan hyn ydy codi treth y cyngor a mae gwasanaethau, lefel gwasanaethau mynd lawr. Mae Jason wedi deud toriadau. Dwi'n mynd i angytuno fo chdi nad da ni ddim wedi sôn amdano fel toriadau o blaen, mi da ni wedi. Dwi'n meddwl fod da ni'n neud yr wellbeing impact assessments efo bob un o'r toriadau, a maen nhw gyd yn dod allan yn negatif, da ni'n gwybod hynny, da ni wedi deud hynny drosodd. Da ni'n misio neud o. Da ni'n misio bod yn y sefyllfa yma, ond di'r pres ddim gynnon ni, felly mae rhaid i ni ffendio'r 25 miliwn yna rwsyd drwy godi treth y cyngor a drwy dorri ar bethau eraill, ac wrth gwrs drwy gynyddu incwm rhywbeth oedd charges ac yn y blaen. Felly, dwi'n meddwl, dwi ddim yn cytuno efo chdi'n fanna. Ti'n sôn bod hon ddim yn gyllideb gytbwys balanced budget, ond eto ma hi. Da ni yn cydnabod bod na risg yn hi, oherwydd na da ni'n gwybod beth yw'r arbedion yn union eto. Lle da ni'n gwybod yn union faint o arbedion fydden ni'n neud o wahanol bethau. A na, mewn rei pethau, da ni'n cydnabod na da ni'n gwybod beth fydd yr arbedion. Ond ma hi yn balanced, oherwydd da ni'n gwybod faint o arbedion da ni angen i wneud, a da ni'n barod i wneud nhw. Mae reserves, o'ch chi'n sôn amdano nhw, maen nhw'n mynd tuag at ddefnydd un tro, costa sy'n mynd i ddigwydd unwaith, mwyn dod â costa parhaol i lawr, a ma hynny'n ddefnydd call o reserves. Felly, ie, na gwybod sgen i dweud. Diolch yn fawr chdi.
Thank you very much, Gwyneth. I'll finish then with Martin and then I'll go to the amendment for 3.4, if you don't mind. Martin, next then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this feels like a blood from a stone budget. You know, we've been squeezing these stones for years and years, and it's getting harder and harder to find to balance the budget. I do feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel here. It might be Liz with a torch and another graph, but either way, that's still exciting. But I think there is a way through this. I think it's been really difficult and frustrating for us all because not one of us ever wants to make a cut. Nobody wants to take anything away. I think we've talked about what is statutory and what isn't. And I was satisfied that it's not as easy as that. You know, something might not be statutory, but it might have huge impacts from taking it away. It's a complicated thing to do that. We've discussed about starting from bare bones and then adding what we can afford, but I don't think that's practical. I do feel like we've all been involved in this process. We've had opportunity to scrutinise and take it through scrutiny. We've had opportunity to make sure the impacts have all been identified. that are minimised and where possible mitigated. And we've all had opportunities to suggest alternatives. It's not easy. You can tell it's not easy because there haven't been loads of suggestions coming forward on what we should do instead. And I think we need to think about this now. We know we're in a difficult position, and just criticising and saying we're disgusted in cuts is not going to help us or the residents of Denbighshire get through this. We need to be constructive in the way we make criticism here. I think to mention the climate change strategy, the emergency that we've declared, I still feel that we're taking this very seriously. It'd be selfish of me to stand here and demand that there were no cuts to that programme. I don't feel we had enough money to spend on that programme in the first place. But I think we've got the will at Denbighshire to take it seriously and do as much as we can with the resources available to us. So, you know, it's by us all pitching in and making sure those resources are directed as efficiently as possible. We can do the best with what we've got. We can't take a short-term view and just, you know, cut things now. We've got to keep looking into the future. I think there's light at the end of this tunnel. I'll support this budget because, you know, I'm gonna trust in the process you put forward, and I'll back it, and I'll contribute where I can, and you know, I think if we all pitch in, fingers crossed, we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Right, I'd like just to ask my second in command or third in command. Oh,
I'm not in command of anything.
no, whatever. My brain. But how do we amend 3.4 then?
Okay, well,
Liz?
as I understand it, from Liz's explanation, effectively 3.4 would stay as is, other than the number. So the number would change from 500k to a million. So you would need somebody to propose that amendment, and that would be to amend 3.4 to read to. Got a proposer.
We've got a proposer. We've got a seconder. James, Councillor Allen and James.
If I just confirm that what the wording will be, then it would be to delegate authority to the head of finance and audit in consultation with the lead member for finance to adjust the use of cash reserves included in the budget proposals by up to £1 million if there is movement between the draft and final settlement figures in order to allow the setting of council tax in a timely manner. So that's been moved and proposed.
Okay, it's been. Could we just all throw a show of hands? Do we agree with that? I don't think we need to go and vote in anywhere, do we? No. Okay, so that's passed.
That's clearly a majority. I think we'd ask if anyone's against.
Oh, sorry. Is anyone against? No.
Abstention.
Abstentions? No. I told you with my brain. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, I shall open this to the floor now, unfortunately. Yes, I will. Mark Young's first on my list. Yes, you are. I don't know how. Yeah, but and Chris.
Okay. Okay, Chair. Well, thank you, and I'm going to have no problem thanking people where I think it's due. So, Liz, not only are you professional, but I was involved in emails going out at 1 o'clock in the morning over the weekend. So, thank you, but I hope everyone's looking after you. Obviously, doing a lot of hours and stepping in so shortly. You're not. Thank you. It's important. So I've got no problem with that. Now to the difficult stuff. So I'm going to touch on a few services. Don't take it personal. I'm going to touch on roads, libraries, and I just want to talk about the collective impact of the cuts. I've mentioned it to Lead Officer Tony Ward. I want to talk about that because I think it's important. I will definitely have a copy with anyone afterwards, but I will remind the Chief Executive and Councillor Hogg it's their turn to buy the copies. Okay, so I just want to talk about, so we are asking for more, and the cuts and proposals have come through one at a time. But if I was walking through Denby, Vale Street, we know needs doing, and the road's at the top, and we know we're not going to have money for a while. I get to the library, which could be cut, is going to be, and it could be shut. I jump in my car and I go to the council offices in town, which are going to be, and then I drive round to the car park to find somewhere to park, and one of the car parks is proposed to be closed. I jump out and think, before I find somewhere to park, I'll go to Lou, and they're going to be closed. And then I walk around to find a toilet, and the town hall's under the future. That's not clear. So I just want to commit me off the Chief Exec of the economy is important, isn't it? And whether you're centre, right or left, growing the economy is the way out of this. And some people quote 10% increase, 20 to the economy. But we have to make sure that the feeling of towns, it feels like they're open and not closed. So I know it's a difficult one, and most of it have been really busy, but it's that collective impact. Sometimes we might have to
Just cut it a bit short, but I'm
yeah. Okay.
Don't turn your mic off.
I won't be long. I won't be long. So it's
oh
just,
yeah.
which I mentioned to Tony, I think it's really important. We don't want Denby Town or any town to feel like they're closed. I had a shop for a number of years. If the towns were busy, we were busy. And it's that impact of that. I want to think, I know we're doing it and we're looking for money and they're coming through, but that collective approach, I'd like a commitment off the chief exec to look at that. And if the impacts are too hard, we're going to have to change directions because the economy and supporting business is important. The last one on schools, I've said this many times. I was in a meeting last week. I'm a chair of governors and we know it's difficult, but going forward, most secondary schools are in deficit and overspending. You've clearly got a saving there. No one wants it, as we say, but the saving's there. So we've got to save a deficit plus nearly 3 million. That doesn't sound doable. So I'm going to push back and say, how's it work when we've got a service which is overspending in deficit going forward, and we're asking for a saving from the balanced budget? So just those two, please, and joking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do you want to kick in first?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll go first.
You'll go, Graham, go
In
first.
the order it was,
Okay, yeah, I was waiting
it
for
was
you.
asked, yeah, of course. So, Mark, straight question: do I give a commitment that we support our local towns and the local economy? Yes, is the short answer to that. Let's not. Of course, we still need to do that. So, there's a balance along all these things, and we talk about we've still got a £260 million budget. So we've still got positive things that we can do. So it's all about balancing the budget, some difficult decisions. But in terms of a commitment around towns and the economy, of course, we want to do that in the balance of everything else. And let me just say, we've got March for Business coming up. So where we work really closely with the FSB, and there'll be events on there where we can support business, for example. So that's not being proposed to be cut. We continue to sit on the North Wales Economic Ambition Board, where we're talking about schemes across the region, because the economy doesn't recognise county boundaries. So we need to work collectively with our partners across that piece. Levelling Up Fund. We were successful in 3 bids for Levelling Up Fund. No other authority has done that. That's bringing in circa £35 million of capital investment into predominantly our towns, but there's some of our more rural communities are also benefiting from that. Shared Prosperity Fund, any number of projects that are ongoing there that we've been able to help and support. Welsh Government Transforming Towns. So my vision, if you like, for how we support the economy going forward is also about maximising that external funding. So we can continue support our town centres, continue to make sure that we create jobs for local people. That needs to remain part of our list of priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Jill, Liz, can you update on his school?
Thank you. It's fine. Don't worry, I don't think I've had it. So the question around schools then that we were asking, so the schools budget will increase overall, but there will be a reduction. That will be a reduction in the funding formula that goes out. So the funding formula allocates how the funding goes to schools, and that's on the majority of pupil numbers. We have what's called a SIFT process. So that's where schools that are in financial difficulty follow a process. That's where they have to apply for a licence deficit to go into a deficit budget. And within that, there is a recovery plan for how they come out of that deficit. And there are levels within that process, and that comes all the way up to myself and Geraint Davis as head of education, where we meet with those schools to assess that recovery plan and to see what they can do in order to come out of deficits, and understanding the impact of that deficit on the delivery of education. So Geraint is there predominantly for the education side of things, and I'm there for the financial side of things. So that is a challenge to schools, but it's also a support, in helping them through those difficult times. Some things happen to schools whereby there is a reduction in pupil numbers, and that is what is causing, and there is a need to adjust the way that they're delivering the curriculum because of a reduced number of pupils, and that's what predominantly we're working through in that process. We have communicated to schools, so there was schools budget forum last week, which both Jill and I, Jill as lead member for education, attended, and we're having those discussions with schools around what the impact will be. And there was also a briefing for head teachers last Friday morning, which I attended to deliver the message to those around what the proposals were. So they have been planning for it, and that will have been taken into consideration to those that are already in deficit through the SIFT process. That helps.
Thank you, Liz. Next on my, I've got Bobby Feely.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Liz, because you do explain things really well, I have to say. And I know you've said that we've been kept informed, but just to recap on what a couple of people have said already, we did in 23-24 have a better than expected settlement of 8.2%. And at that time, we had a funding gap of 10.5 million, and proposals to bridge that gap had been identified. So we agreed to set our optimistic 3.8% council tax on the back of that, which, as everybody has said, was the lowest in Wales. So back then, and it's only a year ago, we did have a lot of reason for optimism on the council. The latest estimate is 25 million gap, and the pressures are rising. And here we are this morning with a recommendation to set the council tax at 9.34%, nearly 3 times as much. This is an awful lot, I think, to ask our residents. What do our residents want? They want, yes, educated children in decent buildings. They want social care as and when they need it. We've also got our duty towards climate change as a council. The residents want decent roads to a reasonably good standard. I'm not saying excellent here in anything. I'm saying reasonable. They want their waste collected, and they want smaller services looked after, like the countryside and the library service and the leisure services, all of which have a massive impact on the well-being of our residents. If local government cannot deliver adequate services to our residents across the county, then what on earth is the point of local government if we can't do that? We're asking our residents to pay nearly 3 times more than last year. I think that's unacceptable. I know it's not 3 times, I'm saying nearly 3 times, 3.8 to 9. Go on then.
No, we're not asking them to pay 3 times as much as they paid last year. The increase is 3 times as much. So the
Okay.
bill will go up
Yes,
by about 100
I understand.
something
That
pounds.
was perhaps badly put. Apologies. But it nevertheless is a massive increase, and a bigger increase than any increase I have ever encountered from one year to a next. And for those reasons, I'm afraid it will be impossible for me to put up my hand. I just do not think it is fair on the residents to ask that big an increase in 1 year. I was going to say a bit about the health service, which you referred to, just a small bit, to say that although Welsh Government do have charge of how money is distributed, they give the health service in Wales way more than local government. And it's more than half the budget, to be honest. And that's their choice. But 4 out of those 7 health boards across Wales are failing and not living within their budgets, which we in local authority do have to do.
Mic on, mic off. Jason did you want to follow that? Or okay, next on my list is Chris Evans then. I'll put you in the queue, Jason. Sorry, mate. I thought you were
Thank you, Chair. Is it morning or afternoon?
It's still morning.
Just a couple of things.
live.
I won't talk about facts and figures. That's not what I'm about. But the cabinet meeting, Jason, in all respect, the behaviour towards Hugh Irving in that meeting last week was out of order. And many...
This is not...
No. Many others agree with me, and it needs addressing. Thank you. But secondly, in that meeting... In that meeting...
Point of order, Chair. That's out of order. Concept's out of order.
No. And just like that meeting was.
Out of order.
In that
It's
meeting...
order.
The phrase, and it's been batted about in this meeting, we were in unprecedented times. It has never been heard of. We set the budget. Gwyneth, you set that budget in unprecedented times. Yes? We were all patting ourselves on the back. We haven't raised the council tax. Yes? And now we're in this financial difficulty. We need to stop the party political games, leave them in the car park and do it for the residents of Denbighshire. Not what Westminster is doing, not what the Senate is doing. For the Denbighshire residents that will struggle. And it's not the people on benefits or just the people on benefits. It's the working people. The working people that have to go to Eirianfa for the food parcels, working, husband, wife, 3 kids. It is wrong to ask them for more money because the fly tipping will still carry on, the dog fouling, the grass will still grow higher, and the services will get cut. And you have the nerve to ask for more money. It is totally wrong. And I will not be supporting this. And I hope anybody that has read and looked at that in the right mind and remembering what we had in the last meeting agrees with me.
Thank you very much for your time, Chris. Well, Gary was going to explain one part first, and then Gary wants to go first.
Well, since what appears to be raised as an issue about conduct, what I would say as monitoring officer that I was present at the cabinet meeting, and that whilst there was a difference of opinion between members, it was expressed in a respectful way, and there was nothing whatever in terms of procedure or conduct that would cause me any concern from a monitoring officer point of view.
Gary, Jason?
Yeah, I'm going to come in, Chris, and say, with respect, you're completely wrong. You're totally wrong. And the reason that you're wrong is that if you watch the broadcast back, you will see that what I did was ask Hugh, where are you, Hugh? On the end there, was I asked Hugh that he stay within the remit of what the Constitution says we should debate that day. And what the Constitution said that we should have debated that day was the outcome of the scrutiny committee. Hugh Williams is on the screen. He presented a good report and presented himself well, and he took questions. As a result of those questions and that scrutiny, the cabinet came to a decision. Okay. Now, the Constitution quite clearly says that is the point of a call-in when it comes to cabinet. It expressly says, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not to repeat the debate. Hugh, in fairness, was very honest And Hugh said, indulge me, you can watch it back, indulge me, I want to go over all the reasons again. And I rightly said no. Hugh pushed back, and I pushed back against him. That's politics, okay? So I think the Constitution backs me up. What Gary said backs me up. I think you're wrong. And I'll end with something else as well. We had a Prestatyn Mags meeting that night, and we were discussing a Prestatyn issue around how we use the levelling up fund. And there were some differences of opinion. Hugh and I were on the same page. I spoke up in favour of what Hugh was proposing, and he spoke in favour of me. You know what? We had a little laugh. And we'd had a tiff in the morning, but by the evening we were friends. That's politics. I did nothing wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I did say I wanted a civil meeting. I hope I'm getting one. Thank you. You wanted to respond to
Very quickly,
Chris's...
Chris, you know what? I would say I'm glad to see that you're angry about this, because we should all be angry about this. You know, but and this is key. We shouldn't be thinking that this is somehow mismanagement by Denbighshire that's caused this gap in our finances. And that is important to understand. You know, it's not party politics, it's facts. Councils in England have already declared a Section 114 order. Other councils in England have said that they're at risk of doing so. Councils in Wales have said the same thing. Councils in Wales generally have a £600 million deficit for next year. That's just to put that in context. 600 million is the amount, well, maybe that the English government are putting in for English councils next year, but Welsh councils need that much. English councils need much more. So, you know, yes, you're right to be angry. We really should be angry. This is not right that our residents have to face a cut in services and at the same time an increase in council tax. That's not right. But what do? We can not raise council tax, but then we'll have to cut more. That's the bald truth of it. Or we can cut less, but then we have to increase council tax to 20%. That's the only option that we've got. We don't have a magic bullet whereby we can keep services as they are and have a reasonable raise in council tax. You know, we can't.
Would it not have made more sense then to raise it, the first council tax, set the council tax at 3.8?
We can't go back to that.
No, but would it not have made sense to set that to a reasonable in the beginning? Because it was supposed to be, the words that came out of the cabinet was, it was a robust, wasn't it?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
We went there and we can't go back. We made a mistake. If we did, we don't know if we did. Terry Mendes next on my list, the new Terry Mendes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it wouldn't be a council meeting, would it, without a cabinet member mentioning and blaming Westminster. But just to give you a couple of facts, the Welsh government has been given more money than ever before, but they don't spend it wisely. They spend 33 million on 20-mile-an-hour road signs, which caused a problem with the bus service and cut off my village of Llandegla. So we won't go there. So anyway, it's my New Year's resolution. I'm nice to everyone.
Yeah,
my fellow councillor.
I have to remind members, as much as I laughed as well, that all members are entitled to speak. They've all spoke. No one's barracked them. So if we don't barrack, that'll be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, I listened to Councillor Hugh Irving when he came across. He sort of mentioned the notion of having two boxes, an essential box and an unessential box, and I did notice some wry smiles in front of me when that was mentioned. But that's not that was not a ridiculous idea. You know, that's what happens in business. If you can't afford something, well, you'll cut your advertising budget or you'll cut your maintenance budget, etc., etc. So let's have a look at a couple of essential and non-essential boxes. A non-essential one would be Denbighshire Today. Do we need a communications department? Do any of us here really need 5 emails a day from Denbighshire Today telling us how wonderful we're doing when clearly you're not? There's also Denby Leisure Limited. We're paying 2.3 million to them, and They're still posting a loss as per last year's budgets, but at least we're paying all this money so that Jamie Groves can win another gong for losing money. So,
Names. You can't put names to people, Terry.
okay, but can I just endorse what Councillor Hugh Hilditch-Roberts said, that this budget doesn't propose savings, they're hypothetical savings. They're not there. I mean, I've asked, without like sounding like a broken record, you know, the meetings we've had in Denby or here in County Hall about budget briefings, etc. I've asked the question about voluntary withdrawal. What's the nice one? Voluntary exit scheme. Don't call it redundancy. Okay, the voluntary exit scheme. You know, how many people are we sacking? Do we really need? Do we really need 4,600 employees? And even in the budget, you can't say at this moment in time how many voluntary redundancies or voluntary exits they're going to be. So it's just to reiterate from Hugh Hilditch-Roberts, it's a hypothetical savings. We haven't got no concrete ones at this present time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Chair,
Terry.
point of order, please, Chair. The member behind me has just gone way outside the brief of this paper today. He has made accusations, he's mentioned people by name, Denbighshire Leisure, people who are not here to defend themselves. I know that that person and I and Pete Prendergast spent 2 hours one afternoon explaining the finance of DLL to the member behind me, and I thought he was satisfied that DLL hasn't asked for a penny more than was originally decided in 2019 that they should have, and since then have covered all their cost increases, their pay increases, expanded leisure provisions, and I don't see anything in this paper about cutting leisure services, which has also been mentioned today. Not rightly, because DLL, I voted against it. DLL is a company which is standalone, and if we do want DLL to come and answer for their finances, then we should ask them officially to come here and not make these aspersions when those people are not here to defend themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Reece. Gary, something to add?
Well, it's just probably got in before me, but I would just say we shouldn't really be speaking about people who aren't here in a critical or derogatory manner. They're not here to defend themselves. It's not appropriate.
Can I also
Quickly,
can you just qualify what a point of order is, please? Because I think it's been used in the wrong context.
Well, as a lawyer, I've never actually yet heard a point of order that was actually a point of order. So a point of order technically is around standing orders, but it is appropriate and it is legitimate for a member to make a point about something. So people colloquially use point of order, but that's, yeah.
Thank you, Hugh. I'm glad I know that now. Okay, well, Jill German's next on my list.
Diolch, CADEIRYDD. I'd like to go back to schools, if I may, and I'd like to go back to schools for 2 main reasons. The first is that although schools manage their own budgets, in total they come together as our biggest spend. The pressures that education is under and in delivering education are enormous. Liz has been through these pressures. I want to reiterate them because I think it's important to have a really solid understanding of what the pressures are and what our ask of schools is. We have inflationary pressures to do with energy costs, to do with teachers' pay. We now have teachers' pensions to consider, as although Welsh Government have committed to passing on anything they receive from UK Government for teachers' pensions, we do not yet know what the actions from UK Government will be. We have absorbed those entirely. Our population has increased, as have our free school meal numbers for our children and young people. which plays a significant part in why we have had one of the least worst settlements. I deliberately use those words because none of these settlements are good for local government. But they are the reasons why that formula has set that out. They're not good reasons for us, a rising free school meal children. And that has a pressure on our services and our schools. We can do what we can at Denbighshire level with this. We can make best use of grants, and we do. We have a very small team of officers who get as much as they possibly can from grant allocations, and that sees that money going into our schools, not least for school buildings, which I've heard mentioned today. An enormous amount of work goes into that. So I want to make it clear on schools that although there is an ask, we have absorbed every single pressure that exists to deliver education in Denbighshire. And I know from speaking with colleagues across Wales and indeed other parts of the UK that this is not necessarily the case everywhere. We have made that commitment. We will not pass that on to our schools. It would be my dearest wish to stand here and say to our schools that we don't want any savings from you or any cuts. You're quite right. No cuts. And indeed, we're going to increase your funding. However, that is not the position we're in. We've made it as most straightforward as we can for our schools. We've been honest for them for over 6 months through School Budget Forum that we are looking between 2 and 4%. We've asked our schools to model for 3 and they have done so. There has been an extensive amount of work to make sure that that 3% is kept for our schools. And be in no doubt, this is a budget that protects children and education. We have made that commitment. It's a commitment that we will keep to. I want to make something absolutely clear, though, in closing, that I absolutely condemn the position that our schools are in, and indeed the position we find ourselves in local government. There is cross-party support to say that local government is not sufficiently funded across the UK. It's the English councils we're seeing struggling most. That's an important point to remember. I condemn the position they're in. And I'll repeat this. I said this at School Budget Forum. I said it to our head teachers last Friday. That education is the greatest lever we have for social justice. And I will continue day after day to say this and to fight for this, to make sure that the children in Denbighshire have the best possible lives ahead of them. I will keep going. I will not stop at every level. But I condemn the position our schools have found themselves in. As our Denbighshire education family, and I know from speaking to our heads, that's what they consider us to be, we will work tirelessly to mitigate this impact. But Denbighshire has put a budget together that prioritises education, and I'm proud to say so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I don't think that was a question. The next one on my list is James Elson.
Thank you, Chair. My fellow members, yes, I'm looking at Appendix 1, and obviously the figure at the bottom says 0. What I'm concerned about are the figures obviously above that. It was at one of the budget forms we had that basically I put out there, well, why can't we just write a budget and worry about it later? Our excellent 151 officer came back at me but, very succinctly and clearly, as always. She explained the fact that any budget will have to be robustly tested. However, my point is the fact that there are so many ifs and buts left open at this moment in time when we are asking to vote on the budget, but it must be very difficult to actually say that this can be robustly tested at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Do you want to respond to that, Liz?
I think what we've done is to outline the risk that's associated with those numbers. I suppose so. I'm listening to the room, and the concern that members have is around the 3 million. So I suppose it would be appropriate at this point to come in around the 3 million. So heads of service are aware. I know what my target is, for example. I'm working on that. In an ideal world, I would like to bring to you what my equivalent it is here before you today. I'm not there yet, but I'm not far from that. And that is the position of all other heads of service. And we will get there. There will be things that come along that change those plans, because a budget is a plan. The biggest one I think to mention is the voluntary exit scheme. And so I have some information that I can share that I think would be helpful for members. So we have had about 140 staff applicants come forward for the voluntary exit scheme. If we were to take the total of that 140 people, those savings would be in excess of 5 million. So we're in the realms of that from that. However, there are exit costs associated with that, and everybody is an individual, and everybody's exit costs are different. They're not the same. It depends what your service history is, what your age is. It depends around that. So the costs associated with those 140 would be 6.7 million. So there's significant costs associated with it. We need to remember that's not what the individual get paid. That is what the cost of releasing that, and there are pension strain costs under the local government pension scheme in the way that works that we would need to pay. The heads of service have completed business cases. So this scheme only ended at the end of January. I think it was the 8th of January. The heads of service then within a week have turned around a business case to assess that individual that wants to leave from a service point of view. Is it possible that we can accommodate that leave? What are the costs? And they've come up with their view of it in discussion with their service managers. And the decision rests with the corporate executive team. So the corporate executive team are meeting to discuss each one of those with the heads of service. We've gone through half of them, and the next half are coming in the rest of this week and in early next week. So we're following a set of principles around the decisions whether individuals go or not. So we're midway through that process. Some applications will be turned down. They're in areas such, for example, as social care, where the pressures are such we would not be able to release people who are working in that area, and some because the cost is prohibitive, because around the size of the exit costs. It's at early days, but I'll give you my expectation of where we'll end up. And, I caveat this heavily because it is early days, and it's nothing sophisticated. It's just where I think we will end up at. The savings around that will probably come in at between 1.5 million from that, and the exit cost will be roughly at that level. So it's in line with what we were expecting in terms of where our reserves would be, and it also generates what we need to be generating from that in terms of that 3 million. So whilst we're not there yet, we will get there, and heads of service are working towards it, and we commit to bringing that to members before we get into the new financial year. So we will set up workshops to talk that through.
Thank you, Jill. I think Graham's quickly.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasise that the point that Liz has made, and I'll explain it in my way, if you like, the non-section 151 way, but that doesn't in any way take away Liz's very good answer. The budget setting process this year, like any other year, is not an exact science. It's never been an exact science. It wasn't an exact science last year. The budget is made up of a series of estimates. So if you go to Appendix 1 and you see that we've got a budget pressure that we are anticipating having to spend an extra £8 million, £8 million extra spend. I called it investment previously. I was criticised for calling it an investment. It's extra money in social services. We are anticipating in the budget an extra £8 million on adult services. Extra money being spent. So it's not all about cuts, because those cuts are having to pay for that investment in areas where we are anticipating, not an exact science, those additional costs. And we're also anticipating additional cost of £2 million in children's services. So you can get hung up on any number of lines in this medium-term financial plan, because of course they are estimates. At the end of the year, we will see how much adults social care, how much social care pressures there actually are, but we don't know what they are going to be. We've made an anticipation of what they are likely to be. So of course it's made up of some unknowns. Like in business, you probably have a forecast for cash flow, what you're going to take in the year at the start of the year. And then you monitor that over the year, and businesses might have to change what they thought was going to be their income. It might be higher, and it might be, businesses do it. That's what we're doing. It's about anticipation and budget management. So of course, out of a £260 million budget, and I said it in my intro, we haven't nailed down every bit of that £260 million. We haven't done it. Businesses don't do it. No other council has done it. This is built on a series of estimates. There is a small factor of the 3 million, but I think Liz has clearly explained that. We're already eating into that 3 million. It's just not sitting there going, how on earth we've got no idea. We've got absolutely no idea. That we already know that £3 million will be delivered, because each head of service is already working towards the target they have been given. So the 3 million's been broken down into each head of service. And we've got the voluntary redundancy scheme, voluntary exit scheme, for which we have made no estimate, but we know there's 140 people have applied, and quite a few of those will get through the process. So everything bottomed down? No. Some uncertainty? Yes. Am I satisfied that we have mitigated against that uncertainty? Yes. Time will tell, because budgets change and things will happen during the year, and we will monitor those things. And what we do is every month we take a budget report to Cabinet that gives an update, and we will also commit to what I've said here today already. We're going to commit to more budget workshops throughout the year, so we can keep you advised of how we are delivering on those anticipated savings, what's happening with those anticipated budget pressures, so we've got clarity for members around how we are delivering the budget. So I wouldn't get overly hung up by this 3 million, because I think we're actually already eating into that, and it's on a £260 million budget, which is made up of lots of assumptions anyway. So hopefully that's kind of clarified the position on my side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for being quick. Barry Mellon now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, none of us want to be here talking about this, and it has gone on a long time. But just let me read these out to you, which I did in Cabinet. Nottingham, Slough, Croydon, Thurrock, Woking, Birmingham, Nottingham. All councils in England that have gone bankrupt. Now, it's in the papers every day. It's on the news every day. If we don't understand that, I don't know what we're doing here at all. Welsh governments are following. Caerphilly Council have got to find 48.5 million in the next 2 years. We've got to make bad, yeah, you can call them bad decisions. And they are bad decisions, not only for us, but for our residents. We talk about the toilets, as you said, Mark, we're not absolutely saying shut the toilets. There might be other ways and mechanisms of keeping them toilets open. Like town council, we don't know. We need them discussions, but we've got to put it out there. The money that local councils had to spend was 17.5%, fell by 17.5% between 2009 and 2020. We all know where the problem is. I'm not going to go over there. We're in this predicament, same as every other council in England and in Wales. And we've got to stand up and make hard decisions. That's what the residents put us in for. Yes, these decisions we don't want to make, but we've got to make them. That's what we was put there for. And I'll stand in front of my residents and say, I've done my best. I always will do my best. Let's get this vote over with. And can we turn the thermostats up? I know we're on the cuts, but it's freezing. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Barry. So, I've got 4 more which I'll go down to, and I know it's getting late and it's been a long discussion, but the fact is that this wants discussing. It needs debating. It needs debated properly. So the next on my list is Brian Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be positive for once. Well, sort of positive. I'll end up with a question for Liz. But following on from Councillor Mellor, what he's just said there, and I had this. I've got this on my phone, so I'm reading properly. There is a group of people called the Local Government Association, and they've spent a lot of time going around councils that have got into difficulties and are now in administration. And they published an article on the 2nd of January. And what the article actually said was that what they discovered, that all these councils that are in special measures, and it's still there in the public domain if you want to go check it, but I'm reading it off here, all these councils that are now in special measures, it's not because of a lack of funding. What they've identified, and will you go and look at it, it's there. What they're saying is, and we'll have to take it as read from this article. If I can mention the guy's name, I don't know if they had a legal. Can I mention the guy's name? The chairman.
One of ours.
Well, I think if you're citing a public article written by somebody, then yes.
Right. Okay. Well, it's I obviously don't know the guy. Lord Morse, whoever he is, God bless his cotton socks. He published this, and what he said was, and we'll have to take it as read, that the guy's academically blessed and he's articulate, etc., etc., etc. But what he said was, and the question will come to Liz at the end of this, the failures are down to management and failures in governance. So you've listened to me, thanks for that. You didn't jeer, but it's there in the public domain. So the question to Liz, you did mention it earlier on, Section 151 officer, in the ensuing financial year, whatever's going to come at us, you're going to look at the financial governance. So my question is, what's the meat on the bone of that? What's the mechanism? Will you be able to track it virtually on a, and this might be a bridge too far, on a day-by-day basis? That, and I know that, but again, that's my private sector background, that you did track things on a daily basis. I'll accept that perhaps you can't do that, but what's your mechanism to keep on top of it on a weekly basis? So if there's a shift in the wrong direction, if nobody else knows, you do, you can communicate the chief executive, and there's something going wrong here and we need to take action. So if you can give us some assurance on that, that'll be something positive.
Thank you, Brian.
And I'll see you in the Barry, for the pint. All right.
Liz? Cheers, Liz.
Thank you, diolch. So when articles such as that are written around financial management and around governance, they are talking about what we're doing here today. They are talking about scrutiny. You know, scrutiny is really important in financial governance. So tomorrow there will be a meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. I'm sure we will be discussing budget at that meeting, but there is regular discussion and scrutiny at Governance and Audit Committee. So scrutiny around decisions that are taken, and that's the process that we followed throughout this budget setting process, through the workshops, through cabinets, through scrutiny meetings, through call-ins. That is part of good financial governance around the proposals then that come before you today. What measure? So we need to strengthen in-year financial management. So the tracking of this savings will be really, really important. So what we will do is we will include, and of course it needs to be at an appropriate level. So we will include a monthly tracking sheet within the monthly finance report that comes through to Cabinet. I also think, though, there will be a need to review what goes to scrutiny committees, probably at the performance scrutiny committee. There will need to be regular a dialogue at performance scrutiny, and also again through governance and audit committee. So those are the headlines. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, if I can come back on that, apologies if I didn't sort of properly what I was getting at. And if I use the example, when I was in the halcyon days of a managing director of 200 people underneath me, I wanted to know if somebody spent £2 extra on toilet roll, I had a mechanism in place that the guy that made the purchase, yeah, had a responsibility to come to me to tell me he'd overspent. And can you set something up like that, which isn't out of the realms of an expectation, where you're getting fed the information from the troops if something on a budget goes over a little bit? We're not going to persecute anyone. It's all about communication, and then it gives you the opportunity then to react quick. I accept and I understand the process the council's got, but we really need to have something a bit more when we're tracking it. And one last point for me, Chair, can you put me down for at the appropriate time to ask for a recorded vote, please, on this?
Chair, whilst Liz is thinking about that, can I just honour my feet and say that I agree completely with what Councillor Brian Jones is saying there. The technology, the IT is there to be able to have a day-by-day, hour-by-hour account of how much department services are spending. Terry, DLL has it.
Thank you, Chris. Gwyneth, did you wanted to add anything, or has it
No,
been done now?
Can I just for the minutes correct what you said there, Brian, because Lord Morse is nothing to do with the LGA. He's with the Office for Local Government, which is a department. No, you said the LGA. He works for the Office of Local Government, which is a department of the government in Westminster. So kind of he would take their side.
Well,
I think.
yeah, apologies
So-
for the quote, but I was reading it off a little.
No,
small
I
off,
appreciate
but,
what you said that
Yeah.
he said was correct, but the context in which you put it was completely inaccurate and misleading. So just correcting it for the minutes. Thank you.
Martin, what did you want to?
Quite a concern on that. I think if we're going to cite articles, I think it's fair to cite articles, but we should all be clear where that article has come from.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise what you're doing is saying you have read a article and this is my opinion, but we can't check what you've written, what you're. Yeah, but
I did say that.
well, you didn't give us forewarnings there, did you? You didn't give us forewarnings there, did you?
I didn't put Larry Miller when he was saying all the
Just a minute.
councils.
Excuse me,
For all we know.
sorry, I think all contributions should come through the chair. There was a dialogue going on between two members there, and it should happen through the chair.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Martin, and I agree with you all, but Julie Matthews is next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very brief, but I just wanted to make the point. There's been a few comments that haven't sat really well with me, naturally. But what I want to do is just to thank all our staff, really. They are our most valuable asset. They are the backbone of this council. Without them and their hard work, we wouldn't be able to deliver anything. And it must be a very worrying and stressful time for them when we're talking about budgets. And we've been talking about voluntary exit, compulsory redundancies. So whenever we talk about any sort of cut to our services, and it will affect staff, can we please do it with a level of sensitivity and respect to our staff, whether they work on the front line or provide support services? So that was just one point I wanted to make. But the other thing I just want to mention is and I can't say this word because it's words of more than 2 syllables, the cumulative impact assessments, okay? That's part of the budget pack there, and it's acknowledged the impact assessment on budget savings and proposals will be an ongoing process. As you know, I'm chair of the Strategic Equality and Diversity Group. We are a cross-party group of diversity champions, and we will have the opportunity to feedback, comment, and make any sort of recommendations arising from the impacts on these proposals. So there will be another opportunity, as well as scrutiny, for members to take part in that and to feed this back, and making sure that Cabinet and CET have those recommendations and considerations there. So thank you very much for your time, Chair. Thank
you very much, Julie. I have two more, and then we will hopefully go to the vote with a bit of luck. I'll go with Hugh Hilditch first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things I want to come back on, Graham. I think this is the 12th time I've sat in this chamber on a budget. Never before have I been asked to vote on savings that are not there. I've been asked on assumptions, but savings that are not qualified. I don't care whichever way you dress it up. You can't tell me now what that 3 million is. So that's fact. So assumptions, we always run assumptions because we have budget assumptions in departments, understand that. So this is the first time ever that I've been asked to vote on a budget that isn't robust, okay? And you might think I'm doing this to be obstructive, but the reality of the scenario is, Liz has now given us a figure of 5 million on the exit strategy, whatever it's called, the voluntary redundancy, yeah? So in essence, in a month's time, we could be 5 million better off. Therefore, we wouldn't need such a large council tax, or we could be worse off. But we've already set the council tax. So what I'm saying is, you were asking, and it says, I think in the recommendations, it says the head of finance, the 151 officer, at the time the budget is considered, and the council tax is set on the robustness of the budget estimates and the adequacy of finance reserves. This paper that we've been asked to vote on does not do that, without a shadow of a doubt. And that is my concern. If I know what the 3 million savings are, and it's in there, and I know what the voluntary exit official figure is, not estimated, we can vote on a robust budget. But I urge every member in here, this is not a robust budget. And if you find it your duty to put your name to it, it is wrong. And I'm going to use Jill's new word, it should be condemned.
Thank you. So I suppose I don't agree with that. I've written the paper though, so hopefully that comes as no surprise that I don't agree with that statement. To give an alternative then, so the alternative would be not to include the 3 million of savings, but to include taking a further 3 million from reserves. That undoubtedly then becomes, if my world is robust, but in your world it's not robust, that would make it robust. What does that do to us? What's the consequences of that? What that means is we're setting a budget using 3 million in reserves. And actually then all that means is that those £3 million of savings haven't been achieved in 24-25. It pushes them into 25-26. So actually, in my view, that's then less robust. By giving the heads of service the target now, and they're working on them, we've saved 3 or 4 months, because otherwise what would have happened is we wouldn't have moved that forward. We'd have stopped. We'd have taken all this time that we need to in order to set a budget. And then we'd have said, oh, we need to start on 25-26. And we'd have lost 3 or 4 months. This way, we made good inroads into that 3 million. You know, I'm confident we're going to get to that 3 million. If we don't, though, we've got the reserves to back that up. But this is a way of moving forward with getting those rather than just using reserves.
Chair, I think you get what I'm saying, Liz, right? But what I'm saying, in black and white, this is not a robust budget. Because what happens if the 3 millions don't come? That's the possibility. I'm not saying it's not, but we run that's the risk around this budget. And then we'd hit
you. I think the officer has said, has given you an answer that in her belief, this was going to happen. So I think
I'm just
that's
giving my belief.
it's an acceptance. We have to accept the 141 officers. 151, and it's not Liz, it's Jill. I know. I'll get her right in a minute. Should we resign before we finish? Do you? Sorry. Sorry. Let me go. Miss Thomas. Okay. Last one now is Jason.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I believe it is a robust budget, but we all employed Liz for her complete expertise and her professionalism, and she has exercised that diligently and brilliantly. And we have a clear report that this is indeed a robust budget. Now, a couple of things. Brian, it's wrong that Brian has to thank the room for not being jeered. No member, whatever they say, should be jeered. Terry was jeered, and that was wrong. Even if he was a little out of order on the rules, maybe, I don't know. But I would ask that no member is jeered, or as a member stands up to talk, there's no jeering or comments. We have all of us have a right to be able to do that. Lord Moore is not part of the local government organisation, has been said. Lord Moore is actually a Conservative member of the House of Lords, appointed by Boris Johnson in 2020. In true Johnson style, he's appointing one of his old mates, because Lord Moore used to be the boss of the Daily Telegraph, editor of the Daily Telegraph. So just to clarify, that article probably was not it was probably an opinion piece. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Good. Okay. So quickly on DLL, Rhys basically said what I wanted to say, and that is because of the business model of DLL and because of the way that it's very well run with the support directors from this council, it's very well run. This council hasn't had to face putting leisure centres like many other councils have. So I want to go back to my opening speech about none of us wanted to do this, and there's a common thread here that none of us want to do it, and some of us don't want to vote for it, and that's fine. I get that. But we've been here before. In order to get the first round of austerity through, we've had a lot of chancellors, but in those days it was George Osborne steady for a few years, and we had to get through some really difficult times. Now, I was in opposition then, and I did what many of you are going to do today. And voted against it. But let's look at the decisions that had to be made in those times, and they're not dissimilar to where we are now. And I make these points, and I know Hugh's on the screen, and I've said it. I've been on record, and I'll say it again. That it'd be easy for a new administration to blame the last lot. I haven't done that because of Hugh's leadership through difficult times, including these difficult times. And I'm going to go through a few things that were done. School clothing grants were cut. Kids from low incomes could not get a uniform grant. Low income families were denied going on school trips. Look at this. Library cuts. 3 posts from libraries were cut. The fund to buy books for libraries was reduced. Educational support for school social workers was cut. Cuts to education psychology supports were made. Cuts to school counselling services were made. Cuts to school libraries were made. Cuts to the book funds were made. Again, hitting our most vulnerable children. Denby Town Hall, there was cuts to the closing hours there. Cuts to one-stop services. Cuts to a welfare rights team at a time when our residents needed that support and advice. Charges put in place to parents of disabled children. Cuts to CCTV, cuts to tourist information. I could go on, and I'm not criticising the administration who did that at the time, okay? Lots of us didn't like it, lots of us voted against it. It's come full circle. Lots of us are going to vote against this today, yeah, but we all don't like it. But why were these decisions to get us through the 15, 16, 16, 17 process? Why were these decisions made? Why did many people here vote for these? They voted for these horrible decisions to get a balanced budget, to get a budget over. That's what we're doing today. It's a robust budget. I'll go back to what I said before. We cannot afford to not put this budget through. We have to vote for this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jason. So I'll finish. I think we've had a robust, and again, this robust word keeps coming up. Do you just want to respond, Hugh, because I have finished the debate?
And
if
can
that's
I
okay?
clarify, Hugh, there was no criticism.
No,
I was
I
commending
heard that
your
before.
leadership at the time, Hugh.
No, can I, yes, I wasn't going to make a statement, Chair, but because there was reference to the past, the difference being, and Jason's always been respectful of the past, and that's not having to go back at you, Jason. The difference was that those savings, for a lot of them, and I can't remember them all, alternative provision was found. And it was better planned as well, because we had time. The process was robust and we had time, and we looked into it with alternative provision. The scale was not what it is now. I do accept that, and the challenges are different. What's really difficult to understand on this one is Hugh Hildage's point that we're asked to set a level of council tax without a clear understanding of what the budget looks like moving into next year. And it looks, from my perspective, as if we are reacting, and it's a piecemeal approach, and it's really difficult for us to get our heads around that. I acknowledge the challenge, and I acknowledge the intentions to improve, but where we're at today, given everything that's been said, it's really difficult to support this in the present context. And that's all I've got to say. But I'm not having to go back, Jason. I'm just putting a bit of context to where we were and where you are today. They're completely different.
I completely respect that,
Thank
Hugh,
you.
and let us hope that we can, as you said, find alternative provisions. We've talked about transformational change. I would add that, you know, that it's much worse than it is. It's much worse now than it was then.
Right, go back to where I was. During the debate, one of the members, Brian Jones, asked for a recorded vote, and Gary has said to me we need 8 members to agree to record it. Have we got 8 members of the council that agree to a recorded vote? Yes, plenty, thank you. Okay, so we'll do the recommendation. I'll let Gwyneth recommend it, but I'll let Gary explain what we're talking about. The recommendations first, because one of them has been changed.
Yes, so just to go back to the recorded vote, sufficient number of members asked for a recorded vote. So the way that works, most members will recall, is that I've got a register here of every member's name, and I will read out, once the proposals have been moved and seconded, I will read out each individual's name, and I will ask you to respond to me either with for or obliged if you're in favour of the recommendation, an erbyn or against if you're against the recommendation, and a matal or abstain if you wish to abstain against the recommendation. So the position you're in now, Chair, is just need those recommendations to be moved. I would remind members that you've passed an amendment to recommendation 3.4. So the reference in that recommendation to 500,000 is now £1 million. So I'll hand it over for somebody to move and second.
Will you move the recommendations, Gwyneth? Did you want them to read out? They're all then, no. And okay, you will move, Gwyneth. We have a seconder, Jason. Right, well, let Gary go to the vote then.
Okay, so just to be clear, if you're in favour of the recommendation, or blind or for. If you're against, an erbyn or against, and if you wish to abstain, a matal or abstain. So, Councillor Michelle Blakely-Walker.
For.
Councillor Joan Butterfield.
For.
Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones.
For.
Councillor Ellie Chard.
For.
Councillor Kelly Cluett.
For.
Councillor Ann Davis.
Against.
Councillor Karen Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Gwyneth Ellis.
Obliged.
Councillor James Elson.
Against.
Councillor Chris Evans.
Against.
Councillor Hugh Evans.
I hadn't muted myself. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Justine Evans.
Against.
Councillor Bobby Feely.
Against.
Councillor Jill German.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Harland.
For.
Councillor Alan Heaton,
For.
Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts,
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Martin Hogg,
For.
Councillor Carol Holliday,
For.
Councillor Alan Hughes,
For.
Councillor Hugh Irving,
Against.
Councillor Alan James,
Obliged.
Councillor Brian Jones,
Against.
Councillor Delith Jones,
Obliged.
Councillor Paul Keddy,
Against.
Councillor Diane King,
For.
Councillor Geraint Lloyd Williams, Councillor Julie Matthews,
For.
Councillor James May,
For.
Councillor Jason McClellan,
For.
Councillor Barry Mellor,
For.
Councillor Terry Mendes,
Against.
Councillor Raj Metri,
For.
Councillor Wyn Mullen James,
For.
Councillor Mervyn Parry,
Was there?
he is there.
Mervyn,
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry,
you're on mute, Mervyn.
okay, I'll come back at the end. Cynghorydd Arwel Roberts,
Obliged.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands,
Obliged.
Councillor Peter Scott,
Abstain.
Councillor Hughes Thomas, Councillor Andrea Tomlin,
Against.
Councillor Cheryl Williams,
For.
Councillor David Williams,
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Elfed Williams,
Obliged.
Councillor Errol Williams, I don't think he's here. No, okay. Councillor Hugh Williams,
Against.
Councillor Emrys Wynne, Councillor Mark Young. I'll just try Councillor Mervyn Parry.
Your name's up there.
He's not responded, so I don't think I can record a
Can't
vote.
say no, you can't. I
Okay.
agree.
I'll just do my sums, Chair.
Okay.
The Chair,
No, I got 27, 17, 2. There was 2 abstained. So that was an against.
oh yeah, sorry, okay,
17's right.
yeah,
27.
okay, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Sorry. Don't know some of you.
Sorry, yeah, if could do sums, I'd have been an accountant, Chair. So the vote was as follows. There were 27 votes in favour, 17 against, and 2 abstentions. The motion's carried.
So those recommendations and motions are carried. Do we want a break, or do we want to crack on, or do you want a break now? We want a break. We'll have a break. Thank you. I shouldn't have said that. My fault. Okay. Come along, Miss German.
No one noticed.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Are we? Are we turned on?
Back on now.
Back on, yes, now. We're back on. Okay, there is a few members gone home, as you can well see, so we'll carry on with what we've got, but I am informed that we are quorate. So item 6 on my agenda is the Council Tax Reduction Scheme 24-25, be led by Gwyneth and Liz Thomas. So Gwyneth, do you want to start off, love?
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Felly, mi fyddwch chi'n falch o gwybod nad dwi'n mynd i siarad am hir ar hwn. Felly, cynllun gostwng treth y Cyngor Cymru gyfan ydy hwn. Mae hwn yn rhywbeth sydd yn, mae Llywodraeth Cymru'n gofyn i ni fabwysiadu. Mae yna chydig o ddewisiadau sydd genddyn ni, ond na i ofyn i Liz egluro'r heini i chi a pam bod ni wedi gwneud y dewisiadau heini. Diolch. Cadeirydd, na i ofyn i Liz egluro'r manylion rwan.
Diolch Gwyneth, thank you. So briefly, So since 2013, assistance for those who qualify for support with payment of council tax is called the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Welsh Government have put in place a single nationally defined scheme that operates across the 22 local authorities in Wales to ensure there is consistency of support with the ability for some local discretionary elements. Welsh Government update the regulations annually, and that's an exercise to uprate the figures used in the calculations to determine the entitlement, which set the reductions to the amounts of council tax that applicants pay to reflect the increase in the cost of living. So annually, under the regulations, there is a requirement of council to adopt the uprated Welsh Government regulations. They're summarised in the report, and those regulations are appended to the report. The council is also required to approve discretionary elements. They're set out within the report, and there is no change to what is being proposed next year from what we have currently in place. That's all I was proposing to say to introduce the report. It's an annual requirement. I have got my colleagues, my colleague Paul Barnes on the call. Should members have any detailed question around the council tax reduction scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Have anyone got any questions? Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to double check something really. So there's a £3 million shortfall that's mentioned in section 6. This isn't the shortfall isn't because of the extra discretionary provisions that we're making as a discretionary elements. It's that funding for this has been frozen and gradually this funding gap has increased. Okay. So do we look at things like giving discretionary elements to, say, micro providers, for example? Say you could say someone, a micro care provider providing 20 hours a week, or some minimum could get council tax reductions. We talk about being able to avoid agency work and how much that can save us. I wonder if there's any merit in looking at that sort of thing to try and entice people with council tax reductions in order to ultimately avoid agency work and make a saving that way.
It's something we can consider. So, you know, as part of the previous item, it wasn't council tax reduction, but it was, you know, council tax, an offer around council tax that we're providing to foster carers. So that was part of the previous items. That's something we've done around council tax. Not quite sure how that fits with the council tax reduction scheme, but it's certainly something going forward that I can have a chat to the team and we can have a look to see what is possible within the rules, given that it is a national scheme. I'm not quite sure how much discretion we have, but by all means, it's something we can have a look at. Certainly if it's a cost avoidance that helps us with our own budgetary predicament moving forward, certainly something we can look at.
Thank you, Liz. James?
Just a quick point. I noticed that on 4.21, there's a amendment about the Post Office Horizon scheme not being affected. So people who get compensation will not be penalised by this. Is there any way that we can get that back from Horizon or from Fujitsu? So if we would normally have been impacted there, can we make a claim on for the council tax?
So I think the point there is that those that receive compensation under that scheme wouldn't see their discount or their benefit reduced as a result of that. That's the point. So there's an amendment being made to the regulations this year to ensure that those people that are affected by that scheme aren't unduly penalised by receiving the compensation that they are due. Yeah, so that's the position for them, but that's been set up by Welsh Government rather than something that we can do. If that answers the question.
Yeah, I just thought that if it affected our bottom line, we would be able to claim.
We'll take a look at it. I'll take a look. I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly something we can look into.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, James. I've got no more hands up now. There's two recommendations on this 3132. Do you want to propose that, Gwyneth? The seconder, you Irving over the other side. I've not been asked for a recorded vote. Could we just have a show of hands, all in favour? Yeah, thank you, unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. Worry. Item 7 on my list is the count. Sorry, madam. Of course you can, madam.
So, I'd like to raise a point of order, Gary, and I hope I've got this correct now. According to the Constitution, members are permitted to be present remotely at these meetings, but I feel that there have been members up on the screen that we don't really know if they're present or not because the screen is off, and I do feel that it's important that that we and the public that vote for them know that members are you know, paying attention to what's being said, and I do know Joan Butterfield did request your permission, and that's absolutely fine. I understand that there can always be circumstances whereby, but I just wondered what the position is on that.
No, I just wanted to explain that Councillor Sunderland has had some difficult personal circumstances, and he's there, and I think he was preserving his battery because he found himself in unexpected circumstances this morning. And Joe obviously explained her difficulties. Just to I'm not making any judgment on anyone else.
I think
our two members. I'm just clarifying that.
I think Gwyneth's just getting just for future reference, basically, Jason, as much as anything else. We know about Joan and we know about Gareth's name, Mr. Monitoring Officer.
Yes. So yes, the Constitution and the law say that all members are entitled to attend remotely. We do have a protocol on hybrid meetings. And the protocol is that where members attend remotely, they should keep their camera on wherever possible, appreciating that there may be connectivity or other difficulties, and that if they wish to speak and the technology doesn't support the speech and the video, then to switch the video off then. So as a general principle, we would want members to be on camera wherever possible.
Okay, Gwyneth, thank you. Thank you very much. I say back to item 7 then, council workshop forward work programme. Mr. Gary Williams again.
Thank you, Chair. There are no changes to the council forward work programme, but there is an update to the council workshop forward work programme. And the update is that next week, the 6th of February, there will be a workshop on the single transferable vote. So Democratic Services Committee suggested that council have a workshop on that because there is provision in the legislation for councils to consider whether or not they want to change the voting system for local elections. And this is just a workshop to explain what that is. On the 12th of March, there's a workshop on the waste model prior to the rollout of the new model. On the 9th of April, there's an update on national park proposals from Natural Resources Wales. On the 7th of May, there'll be a workshop which we're proposing to do here in the chamber, because that'll be a demonstration of hoists and equipment from adult social care, because members were interested in understanding how those things worked. And on the 11th of June, there will be a workshop on highways issues. So we're populated up till June, and we're still working on filling in the rest of the year.
Thank you very much, Gary. That's fine. Well, I think that's done. That's wonderful. We're not going to sing happy birthday to Barry, are we? You don't want to do that?
No, I think we'll see him in the
We'll leave that for a...
We'll see Councillor Miller.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being civil like you were, and it's been a very good meeting. I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Well done, Peter.
Yeah.